Good evening, night owls, and welcome to Whisper Crowley, the place where stories linger long after the lights go out. Tonight, we prepared chilling tales paired with the soothing sound of rain to ignite your imagination and make your heart race. If you feel the cold creeping in, tap that like button. It helps keep the shadows alive. Tell us in the comments where you're listening from or share the scariest moment that sent shivers down your spine. Don't forget to subscribe. You wouldn't want to miss what lurks in the darkness ahead. It was supposed to be a simple hiking trip. A weekend away from the noise of college life, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the Vermont wilderness. No distractions, no deadlines, just nature. But the moment we stepped into the dense forest, something felt off. I remember the air was thick with humidity, and the trees stretched so high above us that it felt like we were walking through a green cathedral. The further we went, the more we lost track of time. It was easy to forget that the world outside was still turning. But then, it started, just a faint rumble, so low and distant that at first, I thought it was my imagination. I turned to my friend Noah, who was leading the way. "Did you hear that?" I asked. He glanced over his shoulder, his face unreadable. "Hear what?" he replied. But before I could answer, the rumble came again, this time louder. It was the unmistakable sound of thunder, but there wasn't a cloud in the sky. The sun hung high above us, casting shadows on the forest floor, while the air felt still and unnaturally calm. I could tell something wasn't right, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. Everyone else seemed unfazed. We kept walking, the sound of thunder now growing slightly stronger, but still too far away to feel immediate danger. We continued to hike, the forest around us silent except for the occasional bird call. Then it happened again. A low, rumbling growl, this time followed by a sharp crack, like a tree snapping. It came from somewhere deeper in the forest. My heart skipped a beat. "Okay, now that's weird," I muttered under my breath. "Relax," Noah said with a grin. "It's just a storm, no big deal." It's Vermont, storms happen all the time. But the more he spoke, the more uneasy I felt. I could sense that Noah, usually the most confident of us all, was starting to lose some of that bravado. We paused for a moment, all of us listening intently. The thunder continued, but now it wasn't just a distant rumble. It was growing louder and more persistent, as if it were getting closer, not from the sky but from within the earth itself. "Let's just get to camp and set up," Noah said, trying to push us forward. But I could tell that even he wasn't entirely convinced. The air felt heavier now, almost thick with anticipation, like the forest itself was holding its breath. As we moved on, the sound of the thunder became more erratic, now crashing in intervals, as if it was circling us, waiting for something. But there was no storm in sight. No clouds, no change in the air. And still, that rumble, deep and unsettling, echoed through the trees. At one point, I thought I heard something else, a faint scraping sound, like something moving through the underbrush. But when I turned my head, the forest was empty, the trees swaying slightly in the wind. Nothing was there. Just the wind, or so I tried to convince myself. Noah pushed forward, but I caught a glimpse of the others in the group. Jenna looked pale, her eyes darting nervously between the trees. It was then that I realized, for the first time, that we weren't just listening to thunder. We were listening to something else, a presence in the forest, something that wasn't supposed to be there. And then, there it was again. The rumble. But this time, it was different. Louder, more distinct. Almost like a growl. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Noah paused, his smile faltering for a moment. That wasn't thunder, he muttered. We should head back. But when he looked around, the trail behind us was gone. The forest had closed in. No clear path. We were surrounded by towering trees, shadows stretching long over the ground. The wind had picked up, but it wasn't the usual breeze you'd expect in the woods. This wind felt unnatural. As we started to turn, the first drop of rain fell, and then another. But the thunder continued, louder now, closer. It wasn't from the sky. It was coming from within the earth, the forest. Something was watching us. And it wasn't just a storm. We stood there, frozen for a moment, the forest around us feeling like a cage. The thunder rumbled again, low and menacing, vibrating through the ground beneath our feet. The trees seemed to shift ever so slightly, as though something was moving within them, something we couldn't see. I glanced at Noah, but he didn't meet my gaze. His face had gone pale, and his lips were pressed tightly together. The confident leader I had known seemed to be crumbling before my eyes. Let's just go back to the camp, Jenna suggested, her voice barely audible, as if speaking too loudly might attract whatever was hiding in the trees. I nodded, trying to muster the courage to suggest the same thing, but as I turned to look at the path, I realized that the trail we had come from was no longer clear. It was swallowed by the thickening shadows of the trees. The forest now felt disorienting, every tree looking the same, every turn leading us deeper into a place that didn't feel like the world we knew. Noah gripped his backpack strap tighter, his knuckles white. We need to keep moving forward, he said, his voice trembling slightly. I didn't want to admit it, but I felt it too, the growing sense of dread, the oppressive weight of something unseen but present. The rain had started to fall more heavily now, but still, the thunder came in waves, rising and falling, never ending. It wasn't like any storm I had ever heard. It wasn't just the sound of rain or wind, it was something primal. A sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. We pressed on, though every step felt heavier than the last. The trees seemed to lean in, closing us off from the rest of the world. The usual sounds of the forest, the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, were gone. Now, all I could hear was that thunder reverberating through the trees like a warning. The wind howled, sending drops of rain in every direction, but it wasn't cold. It was warm, unnervingly warm, like the heat of something alive. And then I heard it. A faint scraping sound again. It was closer now, and it wasn't the wind. It was too deliberate. I turned my head quickly, scanning the forest. My eyes locked onto a shadow moving between the trees, something tall and angular. It didn't belong. It was too still, too deliberate. My breath caught in my throat, but I didn't speak. I wasn't sure if anyone else had seen it. But Noah had. I saw the way his eyes widened, his posture stiffening. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Instead, he motioned for us to keep moving, his face tight with fear. We picked up the pace, walking faster now, but it wasn't enough. The air had thickened, the rain now falling in heavy sheets, and the thunder, no, the growl, had become deafening. It wasn't natural. It was too deep, too consistent. It didn't belong here. Suddenly, a loud crack split the air, closer this time, as if it had been made by something moving through the forest at unnatural speed. We froze. I swear I felt the ground beneath me tremble. The wind whipped around us, but there was something more now, something in the air. It wasn't just the pressure of a storm, it was the feeling of being hunted. "We need to find shelter," Jenna whispered urgently, her face pale. I saw her glance nervously over her shoulder, as if expecting something to leap out of the shadows. I nodded, but I wasn't sure where to go. There was no place to hide in this endless sea of trees. The path had disappeared. We were lost. Noah started walking again, his footsteps quick, but there was a hesitation now, a subtle but noticeable uncertainty in his movements. We followed, but every step felt wrong, as if we were being led further into the forest, not away from it. And then, just as I thought we might break through the trees, the ground beneath us gave way, and I stumbled, nearly falling to my knees. A sharp crack of thunder followed immediately, so loud it felt as though it was inside my head. I could barely hear myself think over the sound. I looked up, expecting to see the others in front of me, but they were gone. The path was empty. Noah, Jenna, and the rest of the group had vanished. A rush of panic surged through me. I called their names, my voice cracking in the chaos of the storm. But there was no answer. The only response was the unrelenting rumble of thunder, growing ever closer, like the world itself was shaking apart. Then I heard something else. Not the wind. Not the storm. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heavy. Coming toward me. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The footsteps were unmistakable. Someone, or something, was moving toward me through the rain-drenched forest. They were slow, measured, as if the creature wasn't in any rush to reach me. It was just waiting. The thunder roared again, louder than ever, almost drowning out the sound of those footsteps, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a storm anymore. It wasn't nature at work. This was something else. I whipped my head around, trying to spot the others, but the shadows swallowed the path in all directions. The trees, once familiar, now seemed alien and hostile. The air was thick, suffocating, and every breath felt like I was inhaling the fear that had settled into the ground beneath me. The footsteps grew closer. Every step was deliberate, echoing in the silence of the forest, and I knew, deep down, that they weren't from any animal. It was something that moved with purpose. Something that knew exactly where I was. I took a step back, my legs trembling, but the ground seemed to pull me deeper into the darkness. I wasn't sure where to go. The direction I was facing was the same as any other, just trees, shadows, and the pounding rain. I could feel my pulse in my throat, my breath ragged and panicked, but I couldn't run. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by the fear that gripped my every muscle. And then I saw it. A figure, tall and thin, emerging from the shadows of the trees. It was like a silhouette against the rain, its form shifting and flickering like a mirage. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, a shadow playing with my mind. But no! It was real. The figure didn't speak. It didn't make a sound as it slowly approached, its head slightly tilted to one side. I couldn't make out any details at first, only that it was human-shaped, but far too thin. It didn't have the usual proportions of a person. Its limbs were unnaturally long, twisted in ways that didn't seem possible. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My body felt frozen, as though my legs had turned to stone. My mind screamed at me to run, to do something, anything, but I was trapped, caught in the presence of this thing. The figure stopped a few paces away from me, standing still, like it was waiting for something. I wanted to move, to turn and flee, but the rain had become like a thick curtain around me, the world muffled and distant. All I could hear was the sound of my own breathing and that low, rumbling thunder that seemed to be coming from the figure itself. It stared at me with hollow, black eyes. No pupils. Just dark voids, as if they absorbed every bit of light around them. "Who are you?" I finally managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. It didn't answer. Of course, it didn't answer. I hadn't expected it to. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, the air between us heavy and suffocating. Then, without warning, it stepped closer, its long limbs reaching out toward me with an unnatural fluidity. I took a step back, my feet stumbling in the wet ground, but the thing didn't move. It stayed where it was, watching me. It didn't need to get any closer. It was already inside my head. My breath quickened, my pulse thundering in my ears. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. There, just beyond the trees, something else was lurking, another shape, just as thin, just as tall, moving in sync with the first. I could hear the faintest rustling of leaves, but it wasn't the wind. It was the sound of something circling me. My mind snapped back to reality. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't let it trap me. I turned and ran as fast as my legs would carry me, not daring to look back. The rain stung my face, my heart racing as I crashed through the underbrush, every footstep echoing in the silence of the forest. But the thunder, no, the growl, was still there, vibrating the air around me. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. I just had to escape. The footsteps, those slow, deliberate steps, followed me. I could hear them now, closer than ever, too close. I pushed myself harder, feeling my legs burn with exhaustion, but I couldn't outrun it. I couldn't outrun whatever it was that was hunting me. The trees around me seemed to close in even tighter, the path narrowing until it was just a maze of shadows and wet leaves. I couldn't see anything clearly anymore, just flashes of movement from the corner of my eyes. The figure was still there, following me, always one step behind. I had to make a choice. I had to survive. I reached into my bag and pulled out the first thing I could find, my flashlight. My hands were shaking as I flicked it on, casting a beam of light across the trees. I shone it in every direction, hoping to see something, anything, that might guide me. But the only thing I saw was darkness. And then, from the shadows ahead, I heard a voice. Not a voice, exactly, but a whisper. "Don't run." I froze, the flashlight slipping from my hands. The sound of the thunder grew even louder, deafening now, and I realized I wasn't alone. Whatever was out there in the forest had been waiting for me. The whisper echoed through the trees, soft yet sharp, like a razor slicing through the thick air. I couldn't make out the words, but I felt them. It was a command. A warning. My skin prickled with a cold sweat, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I stood there, frozen, as the world around me seemed to blur. The light from the flashlight flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the ground. I had to move. I couldn't just stand there. The footsteps were closer now, closer than ever, but the voice had stopped. The forest was once again silent, except for that constant, ominous growl, the thunder that felt like it was vibrating from the very earth. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the darkness, trying to spot any sign of the creature that was hunting me. But the more I searched, the less I saw. The trees were no longer just trees, they were looming figures, dark and formless, stretching out like fingers ready to grab me. The light of the flashlight cast fleeting glimpses of movement, but it was never enough to fully see what was there. I tried to steady my breathing, forcing my mind to focus. I couldn't let fear take control. But as the minutes dragged on, it was becoming harder to tell where the forest ended and the threat began. Then, there was movement. Quick, swift, like a shadow darting between the trees. A flash of something tall and thin, with long limbs. The figure. It was watching me again. I swung the flashlight in its direction, but it was gone. Disappeared into the dark like smoke. I couldn't keep running blindly. I needed to find shelter. Something to protect me from whatever was in these woods. I spun around, looking for anything that might help. Through the rain and the dark, I saw a faint glow, far in the distance, beyond the thick trunks of the trees. A flicker of light. I didn't think. I just moved. I stumbled through the underbrush, pushing past branches, my legs aching, my breath ragged. The growl, the thunder, the footsteps, they followed me. But I didn't dare stop. The light was all I could see, and it had to be real. It had to be a way out. I didn't know how long I had been running, but the forest seemed to stretch on forever. The sound of the thunder was deafening now, a constant pulse in the background of everything. The pressure in the air was unbearable, like a storm ready to break. The light grew brighter as I drew closer. Through the thick rain, I could make out a small structure, a cabin, maybe. I could hardly believe my eyes, but it was there, standing like a beacon in the dark. I reached the door, my hands trembling as I tried to turn the handle. It was locked. Of course it was locked. A quick glance over my shoulder told me I wasn't alone. The figure was there, standing at the edge of the trees, watching. It didn't move, but it didn't need to. It was already there, in my head, in my soul. I pounded on the door, screaming for help, but there was no answer. No one inside. Panic surged in my chest. I turned back, but the figure was closer now, the shadow tall and thin, its limbs stretching unnaturally toward me. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, and I could feel the weight of something pressing down on me. I had no choice. I had to get inside. With one last effort, I shoved my shoulder against the door. It splintered open with a crack, and I stumbled inside, falling to the floor in a heap. The cabin was small, its walls dark and worn with age. But it was shelter. It was a refuge from whatever was hunting me. I slammed the door shut behind me and leaned against it, my heart pounding in my ears. I couldn't hear the footsteps anymore. I couldn't hear anything except for my ragged breathing and the steady beat of my pulse. I tried to steady myself, to calm my mind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The room was silent, but the shadows seemed to move around me. They flickered and shifted, like something was waiting just beyond my reach. And then, from the corner of the room, I saw something. A shape. A figure. It was hunched low, its long arms resting on the floor, its body bent in unnatural angles. It wasn't the same as the one I had seen in the forest, but it was just as wrong. Its face was barely visible, but I could feel its eyes on me, empty and dark. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My throat was dry, my mouth parched. The thing didn't move. It just stared, and I could feel it watching me, waiting for something. I didn't know what it wanted, but I knew it wasn't good. The door behind me creaked. I didn't dare look, but I could feel the presence, the cold, creeping feeling that crawled over my skin like 1,000 icy fingers. Whatever was in the forest wasn't done with me. It was here now. It had found me, and I had no idea how to escape. The room seemed to close in around me, the air thick with the weight of something ancient and oppressive. The figure in the corner shifted slightly, its long, crooked limbs creaking as it moved. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. Its head tilted unnaturally to the side, and the darkness around it seemed to deepen as though it was feeding off the fear in the room. My heart hammered in my chest. My mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. But there was no sense in any of this. The thunder outside was deafening, the storm a constant, raging presence, but it felt as though it was nothing more than a distant echo, barely a whisper compared to the silence that hung in the cabin. The creature, whatever it was, didn't make a sound. It just watched me, those empty, black eyes boring into me, the feeling of them like a cold hand pressing down on my very soul. I wanted to look away, to move, to run, but I couldn't. I was frozen, trapped in its gaze, unable to escape. I barely registered the sound of the door behind me. At first, I thought it was just the wind. But no, it was more deliberate. It was the sound of something, or someone, pressing against the door, testing it. I knew what it meant. The thing outside had come for me. I took a shaky breath, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside my chest. The walls of the cabin seemed to pulse with a rhythm of their own, as if the very building was alive, breathing with the same terrible presence that surrounded me. The shadows shifted again, growing deeper, stretching longer, as if they too were waiting for something. I turned slowly, my gaze darting between the creature in the corner and the door, trying to assess my options. But I knew there were no options. I was out of time. I had to do something. I had to fight, had to run, had to escape this place before it consumed me entirely. With trembling hands, I grabbed a chair from the corner of the room and hurled it at the door. The wood splintered upon impact, but the door remained locked. I screamed in frustration, my voice raw and hoarse, but the sound seemed swallowed by the walls. The cabin wasn't letting me go. The shadows weren't letting me go. I could feel it now, the creeping sensation in my skin, the heavy presence that loomed just beyond the edges of my vision. The creature in the corner was closer now, its body stretching further, its fingers elongated and curled like claws. I could hear it breathing now, a raspy, wet sound, like the rustling of dead leaves. It was coming for me. But then, a sudden realization hit me, like a bolt of lightning in my mind. I remembered something Noah had said before we left for the hike, something that hadn't made sense at the time. He'd mentioned a local legend, a story that had been passed down through generations in the area, a tale of a storm that never ended, a force that hunted those who dared to enter the forest at the wrong time. I didn't know if it was true. I didn't know if it was just a story. But standing here, trapped in this cabin with something otherworldly closing in on me, it felt very real. The storm, the thunder, the shadows, it wasn't just a weather phenomenon. It was something alive. Something ancient. And it had found us. I turned back to the creature. Its face was now inches from mine, its cold breath brushing against my skin. I could feel its presence inside me, like a dark force that twisted my thoughts, blurred the lines between reality and nightmare. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. It opened its mouth, if you could even call it a mouth. It was a gaping, dark void, like a hole that led to nothing. The air grew colder as it leaned in closer, its breath foul and rancid, filling my lungs with the taste of decay. And then, just as it was about to close the distance between us, the door behind me suddenly burst open. I didn't wait. I didn't hesitate. I didn't care who or what had just entered. I ran. I pushed past the creature, my hands brushing against its cold, twisted form as I bolted for the door. My legs screamed in pain, but I didn't stop. The cabin seemed to shift, its walls closing in, its floor buckling beneath me, as though it were trying to hold me in, trying to stop me from escaping. But I wouldn't let it. I couldn't. I ran into the storm, into the rain, into the darkness. The thunder still rumbled above me, but it was different now, closer, angrier, more real. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know if I could survive. But I had to try. I had to keep moving, no matter how deep the forest went, no matter how far the storm stretched. I ran until my legs gave out, until the world blurred around me. I don't know how long it took, but when I finally collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, I didn't hear the thunder anymore. I didn't hear anything. The storm had stopped. I don't know if I was the last one left. I don't know if anyone else survived. But as I lay there, staring up at the empty sky, I knew one thing for certain: I had escaped. But the memory of that thing in the cabin, the shadows in the forest, they would stay with me forever. Because whatever that was, whatever it had been, it wasn't gone. It was still out there, watching, waiting. And one day, it would come again. It began with a question. Have you ever felt the weight of something sinister lurking just beneath the surface of your own existence? I hadn't until that fateful night when I first noticed the blood on my hands. It was a humid evening in a small town in Florida where the air felt heavy, almost electric. I remember walking home after a long shift at the diner, the streets dimly lit and almost deserted. The usual chatter of cicadas was replaced by an unsettling silence that clung to the air like a fog. As I approached my front door, I glanced down and saw it, small, crimson droplets on my palms. Panic surged through me. I froze, my heart racing. Had I injured myself? I racked my brain, trying to remember if I'd cut my hand at work. Nothing came to mind. I quickly checked my surroundings, but all I could see were the shadows of the night. The streetlights flickered ominously, casting elongated shapes that danced in the periphery of my vision. I rushed inside, slamming the door behind me. I turned on the lights, illuminating the modest living room that suddenly felt confining. My hands trembled as I grabbed a paper towel and wiped at the blood, but the more I scrubbed, the more it seemed to spread. It was as if it were embedded in my skin, a permanent stain I couldn't erase. Focus, I told myself, trying to shake the panic. I took a deep breath and tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a prank, or perhaps I had brushed against something without noticing. But deep down, I felt a cold dread creeping in, a sense of impending doom. As I moved through the house, the sounds around me shifted. The creaking of the floorboards beneath my feet echoed louder than normal, and every rustle from outside sent shivers down my spine. I peered through the window, but the street remained empty, save for the flickering street lamp casting strange shadows. I thought I saw a figure, but when I blinked, it was gone. That night, sleep evaded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with possibilities. What if it was a warning? What if something terrible was coming? The blood on my hands felt like a sign, a curse I couldn't shake. The walls of my home, once a sanctuary, felt like they were closing in. Days passed, and the blood never fully faded from my memory. I washed my hands obsessively, but it was more than a physical stain. It was a mark on my psyche. Each time I thought about it, I felt a shiver run down my spine. I began to notice that others around town were becoming paranoid, too. I overheard whispers at the diner about strange occurrences, people finding inexplicable blood on their hands, just like me. Was it a coincidence? Or were we all experiencing the same madness? As I stood behind the counter, pouring coffee for my customers, I could see the unease in their eyes. It was as if we were all connected by this unseen thread of terror, drawing us closer to a truth we dared not confront. I decided I had to find answers. But as I dug deeper, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was not just out there in the town, but within myself. What if this was all a trick of the mind? The thought unsettled me. Was I losing my grip on reality? With each passing day, the atmosphere thickened with tension, and I found myself trapped in a web of fear, uncertainty, and isolation. The mundane became macabre. The sounds I had once ignored now morphed into sinister echoes. And I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. As I prepared to face the coming storm, I felt the weight of something dark looming on the horizon. The blood on my hands was merely a warning. Something was coming, and I could either run or confront it head-on. But what if I was not ready for what lay ahead? The following days morphed into a blur of paranoia and sleepless nights. My mind was a maze of thoughts, each twisting into darker corners. The whispers in the diner grew louder, and I could feel the weight of fear pressing down on me like a thick blanket. It was no longer just about me. The town seemed to pulse with an undercurrent of dread, a collective consciousness grasping at straws of normalcy. I took to wandering the streets after work, trying to find answers in the familiar, yet increasingly alien, landscape. My footsteps echoed against the pavement, the sounds of my own heart pounding in my ears. I noticed others were starting to avoid eye contact, their faces shadowed with worry. Some even wore gloves, as if shielding themselves from an unseen plague. One evening, while passing by the park, I overheard a group of neighbors discussing the bloodstains. They spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting around as if expecting someone to jump out from the bushes. "It's not just blood," one woman said, her voice trembling. "It's a warning. Something is coming." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. What could be coming? The idea that this was a collective hallucination lingered in the back of my mind. Was it stress, fear, or something more sinister? I couldn't tell. That night, I returned home, my heart heavy with dread. I sat on my couch, staring blankly at the wall, when I heard it, a soft rustling sound coming from outside. It was a quiet shuffling, almost like footsteps, but it was too subtle to be certain. My breath caught in my throat. I got up slowly, creeping toward the window. Peering through the curtain, I saw nothing. The street was empty, save for the flickering street lamp. Yet, the rustling persisted, growing louder and more insistent. My heart raced as I felt an overwhelming urge to look away, but curiosity anchored me in place. Suddenly, a shadow moved past the light. I squinted, trying to catch a glimpse, but it was gone in an instant. My mind raced, concocting terrifying images of what could be out there. I thought of the whispers, the blood, the fear. My thoughts spiraled, pushing me toward the brink of hysteria. I decided to call my friend Leo, someone who had always been rational and grounded. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" he said, his voice steady. "Leo, I don't know how to explain this. I think something is happening in the town. People are getting blood on their hands, and I saw something outside my window." My voice quivered as I spoke. "Just relax," he said, his tone calming. "Meet me at the diner. We'll talk it out." It began with a question. Have you ever felt the weight of something sinister lurking just beneath the surface of your own existence? I hadn't until that fateful night when I first noticed the blood on my hands. It was a humid evening in a small town in Florida where the air felt heavy, almost electric. I remember walking home after a long shift at the diner, the streets dimly lit and almost deserted. The usual chatter of cicadas was replaced by an unsettling silence that clung to the air like a fog. As I approached my front door, I glanced down and saw it, small, crimson droplets on my palms. Panic surged through me. I froze, my heart racing. Had I injured myself? I racked my brain, trying to remember if I'd cut my hand at work. Nothing came to mind. I quickly checked my surroundings, but all I could see were the shadows of the night. The streetlights flickered ominously, casting elongated shapes that danced in the periphery of my vision. I rushed inside, slamming the door behind me. I turned on the lights, illuminating the modest living room that suddenly felt confining. My hands trembled as I grabbed a paper towel and wiped at the blood, but the more I scrubbed, the more it seemed to spread. It was as if it were embedded in my skin, a permanent stain I couldn't erase. Focus, I told myself, trying to shake the panic. I took a deep breath and tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a prank, or perhaps I had brushed against something without noticing. But deep down, I felt a cold dread creeping in, a sense of impending doom. As I moved through the house, the sounds around me shifted. The creaking of the floorboards beneath my feet echoed louder than normal, and every rustle from outside sent shivers down my spine. I peered through the window, but the street remained empty, save for the flickering street lamp casting strange shadows. I thought I saw a figure, but when I blinked, it was gone. That night, sleep evaded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with possibilities. What if it was a warning? What if something terrible was coming? The blood on my hands felt like a sign, a curse I couldn't shake. The walls of my home, once a sanctuary, felt like they were closing in. Days passed, and the blood never fully faded from my memory. I washed my hands obsessively, but it was more than a physical stain. It was a mark on my psyche. Each time I thought about it, I felt a shiver run down my spine. I began to notice that others around town were becoming paranoid, too. I overheard whispers at the diner about strange occurrences, people finding inexplicable blood on their hands, just like me. Was it a coincidence? Or were we all experiencing the same madness? As I stood behind the counter, pouring coffee for my customers, I could see the unease in their eyes. It was as if we were all connected by this unseen thread of terror, drawing us closer to a truth we dared not confront. I decided I had to find answers. But as I dug deeper, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was not just out there in the town, but within myself. What if this was all a trick of the mind? The thought unsettled me. Was I losing my grip on reality? With each passing day, the atmosphere thickened with tension, and I found myself trapped in a web of fear, uncertainty, and isolation. The mundane became macabre. The sounds I had once ignored now morphed into sinister echoes. And I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. As I prepared to face the coming storm, I felt the weight of something dark looming on the horizon. The blood on my hands was merely a warning. Something was coming, and I could either run or confront it head-on. But what if I was not ready for what lay ahead? The following days morphed into a blur of paranoia and sleepless nights. My mind was a maze of thoughts, each twisting into darker corners. The whispers in the diner grew louder, and I could feel the weight of fear pressing down on me like a thick blanket. It was no longer just about me. The town seemed to pulse with an undercurrent of dread, a collective consciousness grasping at straws of normalcy. I took to wandering the streets after work, trying to find answers in the familiar, yet increasingly alien, landscape. My footsteps echoed against the pavement, the sounds of my own heart pounding in my ears. I noticed others were starting to avoid eye contact, their faces shadowed with worry. Some even wore gloves, as if shielding themselves from an unseen plague. One evening, while passing by the park, I overheard a group of neighbors discussing the bloodstains. They spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting around as if expecting someone to jump out from the bushes. "It's not just blood," one woman said, her voice trembling. "It's a warning. Something is coming." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. What could be coming? The idea that this was a collective hallucination lingered in the back of my mind. Was it stress, fear, or something more sinister? I couldn't tell. That night, I returned home, my heart heavy with dread. I sat on my couch, staring blankly at the wall, when I heard a soft rustling sound coming from outside. It was a quiet shuffling, almost like footsteps, but it was too subtle to be certain. My breath caught in my throat. I got up slowly, creeping toward the window. Peering through the curtain, I saw nothing. The street was empty, save for the flickering street lamp. Yet, the rustling persisted, growing louder and more insistent. My heart raced as I felt an overwhelming urge to look away, but curiosity anchored me in place. Suddenly, a shadow moved past the light. I squinted, trying to catch a glimpse, but it was gone in an instant. My mind raced, concocting terrifying images of what could be out there. I thought of the whispers, the blood, the fear. My thoughts spiraled, pushing me toward the brink of hysteria. I decided to call my friend Leo, someone who had always been rational and grounded. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" he said, his voice steady. "Leo, I don't know how to explain this. I think something is happening in the town. People are getting blood on their hands, and I saw something outside my window." My voice quivered as I spoke. "Just relax," he said, his tone calming. "Meet me at the diner. We'll talk it out." I took a deep breath, grateful for his steady presence. I quickly grabbed my jacket and headed out into the night. The streets felt different now, each shadow deeper, each sound sharper. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The hairs on my neck stood on end, and I quickened my pace. When I arrived at the diner, Leo was already seated in a booth. His brow was furrowed, and the shadows under his eyes hinted at his own sleepless nights. "What's going on?" he asked, leaning in closer. I told him everything about the blood, the whispers, the feeling of something looming in the dark. He listened intently, nodding as I spoke, but I could see the skepticism behind his eyes. "I think you're just overwhelmed," he finally said. "Maybe it's the stress from work. You should take a break." "No, Leo. This is different," I insisted, desperation creeping into my voice. "It's not just me. Others are feeling it too. We have to figure out what's happening." Leo sighed, glancing around the diner. "Okay, let's investigate. But if it turns out to be nothing, you need to promise me you'll get some rest." Relief washed over me as we settled on a plan. We would talk to the locals, gather stories, and piece together this unsettling puzzle. But as we spoke, I felt the unease creeping back. The town was hiding something, and I feared what we might uncover. As we left the diner, the air felt charged. Every sound echoed through the stillness, the hum of the streetlights, the distant rustle of leaves, and the faint whispers of uncertainty that filled the night. The darkness seemed thicker now, wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The shadows were gathering, and whatever was coming would demand a reckoning. As Leo and I walked through the eerily quiet streets, a sense of urgency propelled us forward. The moon on high, casting a silvery glow that illuminated the path ahead. But shadows lurked just beyond the reach of the light, and I felt a creeping dread that something was watching us. We decided to start with Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. She was known for her vivid stories about the town's history, often mixing fact with a hint of folklore. As we approached her modest home, I noticed the curtains drawn tightly, almost as if she were hiding from the outside world. I knocked hesitantly on her door, my heart racing. A moment later, Mrs. Thompson opened it slightly, her frail figure barely visible in the dim light. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Mrs. Thompson, it's us, Jess and Leo," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "We need to talk. It's important." She hesitated, glancing back into her home before reluctantly stepping aside to let us in. The air inside was heavy, filled with the scent of lavender and something faintly metallic. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I've heard things, strange things." I exchanged a look with Leo, and he nodded for me to continue. People had been finding blood on their hands. "I thought maybe you could tell us if you've seen anything unusual." Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened, and she pulled us closer into the living room. "I thought I was the only one," she said, her voice trembling. "It started a few weeks ago. I found blood on my hands one morning, and I couldn't explain it. I thought maybe I had a nightmare, but then I heard it." "Heard what?" I pressed, my heart pounding. "The whispers," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "They come at night. They sound like 1,000 voices, each one more desperate than the last. I can't make out what they're saying, but they're always there, calling to me." My stomach dropped. "What do you think they want?" She shook her head, her frail hands trembling. "I don't know, but I'm scared. The shadows, they grow longer, and I swear I see shapes moving outside. Sometimes I think they're watching me." Leo and I exchanged glances, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. "Have you told anyone else?" he asked. "No," she replied, her gaze darting around the room as if afraid someone might hear. "People will think I'm mad. But I know what I heard." We spent the next hour discussing our experiences, trying to make sense of the fear that was spreading through our community like wildfire. As we prepared to leave, Mrs. Thompson grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with urgency. "You must be careful, dear. If you hear the whispers, don't listen. They will take you. I'm sure of it." Her words sent a chill through me. We left her home, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being pulled deeper into a darkness we could barely comprehend. As we walked back to my place, the night felt heavier, the air charged with a palpable tension. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking behind us. "Do you think she's losing it?" Leo asked, trying to mask his concern with a casual tone. "No," I replied, my voice low. "I believe her. Something is happening here, and it's connected to all of us." That night, I lay in bed, unable to shake the unease that had settled deep within me. I could still hear Mrs. Thompson's voice echoing in my mind, warning me about the whispers. The very thought sent a jolt of fear through my veins. In the darkness, the sounds outside seemed to amplify. The wind howled, branches scraped against the window, and every creak of the house felt like a whisper of something sinister. I covered my ears, desperate to block it all out, but the whispers persisted, swirling in my mind. As the hours dragged on, I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, plagued by dreams of blood and shadows. I woke with a start, gasping for air. The room was dark, and I felt the weight of something pressing down on me. My heart raced as I realized I was not alone. There, at the edge of my bed, stood a shadowy figure. My breath caught in my throat, and I blinked, but the figure remained, shrouded in darkness. The whispers grew louder, filling the room with a cacophony of voices. I couldn't make out their words, but the urgency was clear. "Jess," a voice called, a chilling echo of my name. "Help us." I bolted upright, heart pounding. The figure vanished, but the whispers remained, wrapping around me like a shroud. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline surging through me. I had to find Leo. I had to find answers. As I stumbled through the darkened house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn deeper into something unfathomable, and whatever it was not finished with me yet. I rushed out of my house, the cool night air hitting me like a splash of cold water. My heart raced as I made my way to Leo's place, each step echoing with the whispers still ringing in my ears. They had called my name, a chilling reminder that I was not alone in this nightmare. When I reached Leo's front porch, I pounded on the door, urgency driving my fists against the wood. It swung open moments later, revealing a disheveled Leo, his eyes wide with alarm. "What happened?" he asked, concern etched across his face. "I saw something," I gasped, my breath still quickening from the adrenaline. "A figure, in my room. It was dark and it whispered my name." "Whispered?" He stepped back, inviting me inside. "What did it say?" I couldn't make it out, but it felt urgent. Like it needed something from me, I said, my voice trembling. "We need to figure out what's going on." "The whispers. I think they're connected to the blood. To everything." Leo nodded, running a hand through his hair. "You're right. We can't just sit here. Let's talk to more people, dig deeper. We need to know if anyone else has seen the figure." Together, we devised a plan to visit the few remaining neighbors who hadn't been hit by the strange phenomenon. As dawn broke, the eerie stillness of the night gave way to the sounds of the waking town, birds chirping, cars starting, the distant laughter of children. Yet, I could still feel the shadow of dread hanging over me. Our first stop was Mr. Ramirez, a retired firefighter who lived a few houses down. He had a reputation for being a bit eccentric, but his stories were captivating. When we knocked on his door, he greeted us with a smile, but I could see the weariness in his eyes. "Morning, kids. What brings you by so early?" he asked, motioning for us to sit at his cluttered kitchen table. "Mr. Ramirez, have you noticed anything strange in the neighborhood lately?" Leo asked, keeping his tone casual. The old man leaned back, stroking his beard thoughtfully. "Strange? You mean besides the whispers?" My heart raced. "You've heard them too?" "Of course," he said, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's been happening for weeks. I thought it was just my old ears playing tricks, but then I saw it, an apparition in the park, a dark shape moving between the trees. I thought I was losing it." "What did it look like?" I asked, leaning forward, desperation edging my voice. He frowned, lost in thought. It was hard to tell. Just a silhouette, really. But it felt alive. And the whispers, they're always there, echoing in the night. It's like they're trying to pull me in. Did you see any blood? Leo inquired, his expression serious. Mr. Ramirez shook his head. No blood, but I found a mark on my door, like a handprint, dark and sticky. I thought it was just sap from the tree, but it didn't wash off. It's still there. I exchanged a glance with Leo, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together in a way that made my skin crawl. What do you think it means? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It means something is here with us, he replied gravely. Something ancient. And it's hungry. As we left Mr. Ramirez's home, the weight of his words hung heavily in the air. We walked in silence, the reality of our situation pressing down on us. Each shadow felt deeper, each rustle in the trees felt charged with an unseen energy. Our next stop was at the Johnsons, a young couple who had recently moved to town. They were friendly, but the atmosphere in their home was tense. When we brought up the blood and the whispers, their faces paled. We thought we were going crazy, Mrs. Johnson said, her voice shaking. My husband found blood on his hands one morning after hearing the whispers. He thought he had cut himself, but we couldn't figure out where it had come from. Mr. Johnson nodded, his face serious. And then we started hearing the sounds outside, footsteps, scratching, like something was trying to get in. We've locked every door and window, but it doesn't help. We can feel it watching us. The sense of isolation in their words echoed our own fears. The whispers weren't just figments of our imaginations, they were part of something much larger, something that wanted to claim us. As we left their house, the sky darkened and an uneasy feeling settled over us. What are we dealing with? Leo asked, glancing around as if expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. I don't know, I replied, my voice tinged with fear. But we need to figure it out before it gets worse. That night, we gathered at my house, planning to stay awake and keep watch. As the hours passed, the air grew thick with tension. We lit candles, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. And then, just as the clock struck midnight, it began. The whispers rose, filling the room, swirling around us like a sinister storm. I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing against the windows, trying to seep inside. Jess, do you hear that? Leo's voice trembled. Yes, I said, heart racing. It's here. The whispers intensified, wrapping around us, suffocating in their urgency. I felt a cold breeze, as if something had entered the room, and I instinctively reached for Leo's hand. Stay close, I whispered, terror gripping my heart. And then, just beyond the flickering candlelight, I saw it, a dark figure standing at the edge of the room, its shape indistinct but undeniably present. The air crackled with energy, and I could feel the whispers pushing against me, begging for attention. Who are you? I called out, my voice trembling. The figure shifted, the whispers converging into a single, haunting voice that echoed through the room. Help us. Before I could respond, the candles flickered violently, and the room plunged into darkness. We were engulfed by the shadows, the whispers growing louder, more frantic. The air turned frigid, and I felt the figure drawing closer. Leo! I screamed, but the darkness swallowed my voice. In that moment, I knew we were at the precipice of something beyond our understanding. The shadows had come for us, and whether we could confront them or not, the reckoning had begun. The darkness was thick and suffocating, a living entity that pressed in on all sides. I could barely see my own hands in front of my face, but I could feel the energy in the room shifting. The whispers grew more urgent, swirling around me like a tempest, drowning out all reason. Jess. Leo's voice broke through the chaos, close but distant, like a lifeline in the storm. Where are you? I'm here. I called back, desperate to bridge the gap. I reached out, trying to find him in the void, but my fingers grasped nothing but air. Then, without warning, the lights flickered back on, illuminating the room in a harsh, sterile light. But the figure remained, darker than the shadows that clung to the walls. It stood there, silent, its presence both terrifying and magnetic. Help us, the voice echoed again, more desperate, almost pleading. The words reverberated through my bones, and I felt an unsettling connection, like it was drawing me in, urging me to understand. What do you want? I asked, my voice trembling as I steadied myself against the wall. The figure shifted slightly, and I caught a glimpse of something that resembled a face, or perhaps a mask, a twisted, anguished expression that sent chills racing down my spine. The blood is the key, it whispered, its tone like ice. Release us. Release you? From what? I demanded, heart pounding. The figure hesitated, the shadows swirling around it like a storm cloud. From the darkness. From the curse of the forgotten. Cursed? Leo's voice cut through the tension. He stood next to me now, his expression a mix of fear and determination. What curse? Why is it happening to us? The figure stepped forward, the shadows billowing like smoke. The town holds a secret buried in its past. Those who forget will suffer. You must remember. Remember what? I pressed, feeling a flicker of hope amid the fear. Long ago, a pact was made, it continued, the whispers intensifying around us. To protect the town, sacrifices were required. But the sacrifices were lost, their blood staining the ground. Now the echoes of their cries demand to be heard. I exchanged a glance with Leo, the weight of its words sinking in. Sacrifices? What kind of sacrifices? Those who do not heed the warning will pay the price, it warned, its voice rising with urgency. The blood on your hands is the link, the beginning of the end. You must confront the truth and find the lost before it consumes you. The atmosphere thickened, and I could feel an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. The figure shifted again, its form flickering like a candle flame, and for a moment, I felt a wave of emotions, fear, sorrow, anger, all coursing through me. What can we do? I asked, desperation spilling into my voice. How can we stop this? Find the heart of the town, the place where the pact was sealed. There, you will uncover the truth. But time is running out, the darkness grows stronger. Do not let fear dictate your path. With those final words, the figure began to dissolve into shadows, the whispers fading into a haunting silence. I felt a pang of loss, as if something vital was slipping away from me. Wait! I shouted, but it was gone, leaving us in the dim light of the room, our breaths heavy with uncertainty. What just happened? Leo asked, his eyes wide with disbelief. Did we really see that? I think we did, I replied, my voice shaking. We have to find the heart of the town. The place where the pact was made. Do you have any idea where that could be? He asked, glancing around as if searching for answers in the shadows. I remember hearing stories about an old well at the edge of town. It was said to be the site of some ancient ritual, I recalled, the memories flooding back. If we can find it, maybe we can uncover the truth. Leo nodded, determination setting in. Then let's go. We don't have much time. As we stepped outside, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting long shadows on the ground. But the air still felt heavy with unease. We hurried toward the outskirts of town, where the well was said to be hidden among the trees. The woods grew denser as we walked, the path winding through the underbrush, and the whispers of the night still echoed in my mind. Every rustle of leaves felt like a reminder of the shadows that lingered just out of sight. When we finally reached the clearing, the old well stood before us, cracked and overgrown, its stonework withered by time. The air felt charged, electric with a sense of history and unspoken dread. "This is it," I said, my voice barely a whisper. We approached cautiously, peering into the dark opening. The well seemed to pulse with energy, a portal to something beyond our understanding. "Are you ready?" Leo asked, his voice steady but laced with apprehension. "No," I admitted, feeling the weight of the moment. "But we have to do this." Together, we peered into the darkness, the shadows swirling around us. The whispers began again, rising like a tide, each word urgent and desperate. "Help us," they echoed, and in that moment, I realized the truth. We were not just searching for answers. We were part of the story, a story that demanded to be told, that could no longer be ignored. With one final breath, I stepped forward, and as I did, the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, pulling me into the depths of the unknown. Have you ever wondered what lies beneath the surface of history? What ancient voices whisper from the shadows of forgotten places? Those were the questions that had haunted me ever since I set foot on this ancient Mayan cemetery in California. My name is Alex, and I'm an archaeologist driven by a relentless curiosity. But as we prepared for the dig, a sense of unease settled in my stomach, like a storm brewing on the horizon. Our team had gathered at the site just outside a small town known for its rich history and mythos. The cemetery was rumored to hold the remains of a long-lost Mayan civilization that had fled south centuries ago, seeking refuge from an unknown catastrophe. I had read the stories, seen the artifacts displayed in museums, but nothing could prepare me for the weight of the ground we stood on. As the sun dipped below the hills, casting long shadows over the burial mounds, we set up our equipment. The air felt heavy, charged with an energy I couldn't quite place. It was as if the earth itself was alive, watching us with 1,000 unseen eyes. "All right, team, let's get started," called Dr. Marquez, our lead archaeologist, his voice booming with enthusiasm. He was tall and commanding, with a passion for history that inspired us all. "We'll start by clearing the top layer of soil. Remember, we must handle everything with care." We began to dig, the rhythmic sound of shovels hitting earth blending with the soft rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. I lost myself in the work, but a nagging feeling persisted, growing stronger as the sun disappeared completely. As darkness enveloped us, the sounds of the night began to shift. The once comforting chirps of crickets faded into something more ominous. I glanced at my colleagues, each focused on their task, unaware of the subtle changes in the air. A cold breeze swept through the clearing, sending a shiver down my spine. I paused, wiping sweat from my brow, and looked around. Did it just get colder? I asked, my voice barely rising above a whisper. Dr. Marquez shrugged, engrossed in his notes. "It's just the night air. Nothing to worry about." But I couldn't shake the feeling. I pressed on, trying to focus, but the whispers grew louder, swirling in my mind like a chant just out of reach. "Alex, over here," called Lisa, one of our interns, her voice tinged with excitement. I rushed over to where she stood, heart racing with anticipation. She had uncovered a small stone tablet, intricately carved with symbols I couldn't decipher. "Look at this," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with wonder. It could be a key to understanding the site. As I knelt beside her, the whispers intensified, their urgency clawing at my consciousness. "We should document it and get it to Dr. Marquez," I said, forcing the unease down. We carefully lifted the tablet, but as we did, a deep rumble shook the ground beneath us. I staggered back, clutching the tablet tightly. What was that? The night was silent now, the air thick with tension. The other team members turned toward us, their expressions reflecting the same unease that twisted in my gut. "It's probably just an earthquake," Dr. Marquez said, trying to maintain calm. But I could feel something was off. The whispers were now a cacophony, echoing in my mind. "We need to leave." "Something isn't right here," I urged, looking around at the burial mounds that loomed like sentinels in the dark. Suddenly, the ground trembled again, more violently this time. The tablet slipped from my hands and shattered against the earth, sending shards flying. The moment it broke, a surge of cold air washed over us, carrying with it a haunting wail that reverberated through the trees. "What was that?" Lisa gasped, stepping back. "I don't know," I replied, fear pooling in my stomach. "But we need to go. Now." Just as we turned to leave, a shadow darted between the trees, too quick to catch a glimpse of. My heart raced as I glanced back, a primal instinct screaming at me to run. The whispers had transformed into something tangible, a dark presence that seemed to envelop us. Dr. Marquez raised his flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. "Everyone stay together," he shouted, but his voice trembled slightly, betraying his own fear. As we moved toward the entrance of the site, the atmosphere grew heavier, pressing against us like an invisible weight. The shadows seemed to twist and writhe, and the whispers turned into sharp cries that echoed in the night air, punctuated by the sound of something scraping against the ground. Suddenly, the trees rustled violently, and I felt a gust of wind rush past me, carrying the scent of damp earth and something far more sinister. I glanced over my shoulder, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a figure, dark and elongated, looming just beyond the tree line. "Run!" I screamed, adrenaline coursing through my veins. We broke into a sprint, the sound of our footsteps thundering in my ears as we raced toward the van parked on the edge of the site. I could feel the darkness closing in behind us, the whispers morphing into desperate pleas. "Don't leave us," they cried, their voices echoing with a sorrow that chilled me to the bone. We reached the van, breathless and shaken, and piled inside. Dr. Marquez fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking as he tried to start the engine. Come on," he muttered, panic rising in his voice. Finally, the engine roared to life, and we sped away from the site, the lights of the van cutting through the oppressive darkness. But as we drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had awoken something that was never meant to see the light of day. And as the cemetery disappeared behind us, the whispers lingered in my mind, a haunting reminder that we had only scratched the surface of the ancient secrets waiting to be uncovered. The van's engine hummed as we sped away from the site, but the adrenaline coursing through me didn't fade. The darkness behind us felt alive, as if it had reached out to grasp us and failed only by a hair's breadth. I could still hear the whispers in my head, their eerie cadence wrapping around my thoughts like a shroud. Did everyone make it? I asked, turning to look at my colleagues, relief flooding through me as I saw them all present, albeit shaken. Lisa sat wide-eyed, her hands trembling. Dr. Marquez gripped the wheel, his knuckles white. "We need to regroup and figure out what just happened," he said, his voice steadier than his demeanor suggested. "We can't ignore what we uncovered. There's too much at stake." As we drove further away from the cemetery, the landscape changed from dense woods to open fields, the moonlight casting an ethereal glow over the land. But that tranquility was deceptive. I could still feel the remnants of that dark presence lingering around us. When we finally reached the local hotel, we gathered in a small conference room. The fluorescent lights flickered above us, casting a harsh glow on our faces. Tension hung in the air, thick and suffocating. "Let's review what we found," Dr. Marquez said, pulling out a notepad. The tablet was key. I've seen similar symbols in my research, but nothing quite like that. I spoke up, my voice shaking slightly. "But what about the figure? The whispers? We can't ignore that." Something was awakened, and it wasn't just a geological shift. "Agreed," Lisa added, her voice steadier than before. "The legends surrounding Mayan tombs often speak of guardians or spirits that protect their resting places. Maybe we disturbed something we weren't meant to. Or maybe it's a warning," I said, the pieces starting to fit together in my mind. If the sacrifices were part of a pact, maybe the entities are still tied to this place, still seeking to protect their secrets. Dr. Marquez frowned, deep in thought. "We need to research more about this cemetery. There must be historical records or accounts that can give us insight into the rituals performed here." As we began to discuss our next steps, I felt a chill creep up my spine, as if someone was watching us. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch, bending at angles, and I glanced toward the door. A flicker of movement caught my eye, but when I turned, there was nothing there, only the oppressive silence of the hotel. "Do you guys feel that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Feel what?" Dr. Marquez asked, looking at me with concern. "The air. It's charged. Like static before a storm." He nodded slowly, glancing around. "Let's not dismiss it. We're in uncharted territory here, and our minds could be playing tricks on us." We decided to split up and gather whatever resources we could find on the Mayan civilization and the cemetery itself. I found myself in a dimly lit library, dust motes dancing in the air as I rifled through old texts and faded documents. Hours passed as I scoured every page, piecing together the history of the site. I learned about ancient rituals, blood offerings, and the supposed guardians of the tombs. Each revelation sent shivers down my spine, but one account stood out, the legend of the spirit of the keeper, said to awaken if the sanctity of the resting place was disturbed. As I read further, I found references to sacrifices made to appease the spirits, offerings of blood and life. My heart raced as I recognized the implications. "No," I murmured to myself. "This can't be happening." Just then, a loud crash echoed through the library, making me jump. I rushed out to find Dr. Marquez and the others standing by the entrance, their faces pale. "What happened?" I asked, breathless. "Something knocked over a shelf in the archives," Dr. Marquez said, his voice tight. "It's too quiet now. We need to leave." As we stepped out of the library, I felt an unsettling shift in the atmosphere. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. We hurried back to the conference room, but the moment we entered, the lights flickered violently, plunging us into darkness for a heartbeat. "What the hell?" Lisa exclaimed, her voice rising in panic. Dr. Marquez quickly turned on his flashlight, illuminating the room. "Stay close," he ordered, shining the beam into the corners. The shadows danced, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a figure in the dark, its eyes glowing like embers before vanishing as quickly as it appeared. My breath caught in my throat. "Did you see that?" I gasped, clutching Lisa's arm. "What?" "See what?" she asked, eyes wide with fear. Something was there. "I swear." Dr. Marquez moved closer, his flashlight beam trembling slightly. "We need to stay focused. It's probably just our nerves. We need to regroup and stick together." But as we huddled closer, a low growl echoed from the shadows, a sound that sent chills racing down my spine. It was deep and guttural, vibrating through the very ground we stood on. "What was that?" I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. Before anyone could respond, the temperature dropped sharply, and the shadows coalesced into something more tangible. I could feel an overwhelming presence bearing down on us, suffocating in its intensity. "Run!" Dr. Marquez shouted, and without thinking, we bolted for the exit, the whispers rising to a deafening crescendo behind us. As we raced through the halls, the darkness seemed to stretch and claw at us, shadows flickering like flames. I could hear footsteps pounding behind us, quick and relentless. "Go! Don't look back!" I yelled, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I pushed forward. We burst out of the hotel into the cool night air, but even outside, the weight of the shadows clung to us. We scrambled into the van, breathless and terrified. "Drive! Get us out of here!" I gasped, feeling the terror boil within me. Dr. Marquez fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking. Just as he managed to start the engine, the air around us felt charged, and the whispers returned, louder than ever, mingling with the growls of something dark and unseen. As we sped away, I looked back at the hotel, its dark silhouette looming in the distance. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever we had disturbed was far from finished. The cemetery had awakened something that would stop at nothing to reclaim what it had lost. And now, we were part of its story, a story that was far from over. The van's tires screeched against the pavement as we sped away from the hotel, the echoes of the growls still ringing in my ears. The night felt oppressive, the darkness swallowing us whole, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being pursued. Each shadow that flickered past the headlights sent fresh waves of panic surging through me. "We need to figure out what we're dealing with," Dr. Marquez said, his voice steady but taut. "We can't just run blindly. We have to understand what awakened at that cemetery." "Do you think it's still following us?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, glancing in the rearview mirror. The road behind us was empty, but my gut told me otherwise. But we can't take any chances. We drove in tense silence, the weight of our thoughts pressing down on us. The faint glow of streetlights illuminated the darkened landscape, but my mind was elsewhere, lost in the legends I had read, the implications of the tablet, and the very real danger we now faced. "Let's head to the local library," Dr. Marquez suggested, breaking the silence. "They might have more resources or even locals who can tell us about the history of that site. If we can find any more details about the rituals or the spirit of the keeper, it could help us." "Good idea," I agreed, grateful for a distraction. We need to gather everything we can. If we can understand what we disturbed, we might stand a chance. When we finally arrived at the library, we moved quickly, entering the dimly lit building. The smell of old books and dust hung heavy in the air. I felt a sense of unease wash over me as I stepped inside, the shadows clinging to the corners like forgotten memories. "Let's split up," Dr. Marquez instructed. "Lisa, You and Alex check the history section. I'll look for any recent accounts or local legends. As we dispersed, I found myself drawn to the shelves lined with ancient texts. I combed through the books, my heart racing as I searched for anything related to the Mayans or the cemetery. Lisa stood beside me, her expression worried. "Do you really think we disturbed something?" she asked, her voice low. "I do," I replied, scanning the pages. "There's a reason those spirits are tied to that place. We'd interrupted a cycle, and now they might be restless." A chill crept through the aisles, and I shivered. I felt as if unseen eyes were watching us, lurking in the shadows. We worked quietly, the soft rustle of pages turning the only sound until, suddenly, a loud thud resonated through the library. We exchanged startled glances, my heart racing. "What was that?" Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," I replied, my pulse quickening. "Let's check it out." Cautiously, we made our way toward the sound, stepping lightly through the aisles. The shadows loomed around us, and I felt the air grow heavier, thick with anticipation. As we turned a corner, we found Dr. Marquez standing in front of a toppled shelf, books scattered across the floor. "I just heard a noise, and then this happened," he said, clearly shaken. It was as if something pushed it over. "What do you mean, something?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know, but I felt a presence, a cold rush that swept through the aisle right before it fell." Just then, the lights flickered, plunging us into near darkness. The hairs on my arms stood on end. "We need to leave," I urged, my voice rising. As we turned to go back, the library door slammed shut with a deafening bang, echoing through the empty space. Panic surged within me as I grasped the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Let us out," Lisa shouted, pounding on the door. "Stay calm," Dr. Marquez commanded. "There must be another exit." I looked around frantically, feeling the shadows pressing closer. The air felt charged, electric, and the whispers returned, swirling around us, their urgency palpable. "Help us," they seemed to call, a chilling reminder of the spirits we had disturbed. "Do you hear that?" Lisa asked, her eyes wide with fear. "Yes," I replied, my heart racing. "We need to find a way out, fast." We moved toward the back of the library, searching for another exit. As we turned a corner, I saw a flickering light at the far end, a narrow hallway leading to what looked like an emergency exit. "Over there," I shouted, pointing. We rushed toward it, desperation fueling our speed. But as we approached, the light flickered erratically, casting strange shadows along the walls. I could feel something sinister lurking just beyond our sight, an overwhelming presence that seemed to thrum with energy. "Keep moving," Dr. Marquez urged, his voice strained. Just as we reached the exit, a figure materialized at the end of the hallway, a silhouette darker than the shadows surrounding us. It stood there, still and silent, its form pulsating with an otherworldly energy. "Run!" I screamed, lunging toward the door. We burst through, stumbling into the cool night air, gasping for breath. We didn't stop to look back, sprinting toward the van parked outside. The feeling of being hunted pressed down on me, a relentless weight that urged us onward. "Get in! Get in!" Dr. Marquez shouted as we flung ourselves into the vehicle. He turned the key, and the engine roared to life. We sped away from the library, the darkness chasing us, whispers echoing in the distance, growing fainter but still hauntingly present. As we drove, I could feel the weight of what we had awakened pressing down on me, an ever-present reminder that we had only scratched the surface of something ancient and powerful. And as the road stretched out before us, I knew that we couldn't run forever. We had to confront the truth of what we had disturbed, or we might never escape the shadows that followed us. The van roared down the darkened highway, the pale moonlight illuminating the winding road ahead. My heart raced as the adrenaline began to wane, replaced by an unsettling calm. We were safe, for now, but the weight of our actions pressed heavily on my mind. "Where to now?" Lisa asked, her voice shaky as she glanced out the window, the shadows of trees blurring past us. "Back to the site," Dr. Marquez replied, determination in his eyes. "We need to confront whatever is haunting us. We can't keep running." "Are you out of your mind?" I exclaimed, incredulity flooding my veins. "After everything we've just experienced? We can't go back there." "We have to," he insisted, his voice firm. "If we don't face this, it will only grow stronger. We disturbed something ancient, and it's not going to let us leave without a fight." The weight of his words settled over us like a blanket, heavy with implications. I looked at Lisa, her eyes wide with fear. "What if we're not ready for whatever we find?" "We'll never be ready," Dr. Marquez said, glancing in the rearview mirror. "But we can't let fear control us. Knowledge is our best weapon." Reluctantly, I nodded, though a part of me screamed to turn back. The whispers still echoed in my mind, growing more insistent with each passing moment, as if urging me to reconsider. The drive back to the cemetery was tense, the silence punctuated only by the sound of tires on asphalt. I found my thoughts drifting to the legends I'd read about, the spirits, the sacrifices, the eternal guardians that protected their resting place. What had we truly awakened? As we approached the site, the air felt charged once more, the atmosphere thickening with dread. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced eerily across the ground. I could sense a palpable energy, a tension that thrummed beneath the surface, vibrating through the earth. "We should go in carefully," Dr. Marquez suggested as we parked the van. "We need to observe before we act." We stepped out into the cool night air, the sounds of nature fading into an eerie silence. The cemetery loomed ahead, its mounds rising like dark sentinels against the starry sky. "Remember what we discussed," Dr. Marquez said, rallying our spirits. "Stay focused. We're here to gather information, not to provoke." As we moved closer, the ground felt alive beneath my feet, pulsing with a strange energy. The whispers intensified, wrapping around us like a cloak. "Help us, help us," they pleaded, their tones a mixture of despair and urgency. "Can you hear them?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," I admitted, fear coursing through me. "They want something. They need us to understand." Dr. Marquez led the way to the center of the cemetery, where the tablet had shattered. The remnants of ancient stone lay scattered like broken promises, and the air hummed with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "We should start by documenting what's left," he instructed, crouching down to examine the pieces. "Maybe we can find clues about the rituals that were performed here." I knelt beside him, the cool earth pressing against my palms. The whispers grew louder, almost drowning out my thoughts. "What if they're warning us?" I muttered, my heart racing. "What if they're trying to tell us to leave?" "Or maybe they're seeking help," Lisa interjected, glancing around nervously. "What if they're trapped?" As I examined a shard of the tablet, something caught my eye, a faint inscription barely visible through the dust. "Look at this," I exclaimed, brushing away the dirt. "There are symbols here. It looks like it could be a part of a ritual. Dr. Marquez leaned closer, his brow furrowed in concentration. This could be important. If we can decipher this, it might help us understand what we need to do. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath us, sending a ripple of fear through my body. The whispers escalated into frantic cries, echoing all around us. "No! Stop!" they wailed, the urgency rising to a fever pitch. "Get back!" Dr. Marquez shouted, pulling us away from the broken tablet. The air grew colder, the shadows shifting and swirling as if alive. I felt a pressure building around us, an unseen force coiling tighter, ready to strike. Then, with a deafening roar, the earth split open before us, revealing a dark void, an ancient tomb that had lain hidden beneath the cemetery all along. The darkness beckoned, and from within it emerged a figure, cloaked in shadows, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "Foolish mortals," it hissed, the voice echoing like thunder. "You dare disturb the resting place of the ancients?" The very ground beneath us trembled as the figure stepped closer, an aura of power radiating from it. I felt a wave of terror wash over me, threatening to pull me under. "What do you want?" Dr. Marquez shouted, trying to stand his ground. "You have awakened me from my slumber," the figure replied, its voice dripping with disdain. "You have taken what is not yours. You must atone for your transgressions." Panic surged within me as I exchanged a terrified glance with Lisa. "We need to leave," I urged, but my feet felt rooted to the spot, trapped by the figure's gaze. "Your souls are now bound to this place," it intoned, raising a hand as shadows coiled around us like serpents. "Only through sacrifice can you hope to escape." "Sacrifice?" I gasped, dread pooling in my stomach. "What do you mean?" "Blood must be offered to appease the spirits," it hissed. "Only then can the cycle be broken." "No!" Lisa cried, taking a step back. "We won't do that." But as she spoke, the shadows surged forward, enveloping her. I screamed, reaching for her, but the darkness held her fast, pulling her away from me. "Let her go!" I shouted, panic and desperation fueling my voice. "Only one shall be spared," the figure declared, its eyes glowing brighter. "Choose wisely, or all shall be lost." I felt a rush of fear and anger, my heart pounding in my chest. "We won't give in to your demands. We will find another way." But the figure only laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the cemetery. "There is no escape from the will of the ancients. Choose now, or suffer the consequences." As the shadows tightened around us, I knew we were running out of time. The whispers grew frantic, drowning out my thoughts, urging me to make a choice. I could feel Lisa's presence fading, and with it, a piece of my soul. In that moment of desperation, I remembered the tablet, the ritual, the inscriptions. If we could decipher it, perhaps we could find a way to confront this darkness without a sacrifice. "Dr. Marquez!" I shouted, urgency spilling from my lips. "We need the tablet. We need to understand what it says." His eyes met mine, understanding flickering in his gaze. "We can do this. We have to." As I focused on the remnants of the broken tablet, the shadows lunged forward, but I held my ground, pushing back with everything I had. "We will find another way," I cried, my voice rising above the chaos. The figure faltered, the shadows wavering as I summoned every ounce of courage. "We will not be your sacrifices. We will uncover the truth." In that moment, a surge of light burst forth from the remnants of the tablet, illuminating the darkness around us. The whispers transformed into a chorus of voices, rising in a powerful crescendo that shattered the oppressive air. "Release them," they cried, their urgency piercing through the chaos. The figure recoiled, its power wavering as the light grew brighter. "No! You cannot escape," it howled, but the shadows began to dissipate, pulled back into the void from which they came. "Hold on!" I shouted, reaching for Lisa as the shadows released their grip. We stumbled together, fighting against the onslaught of darkness that threatened to engulf us. As the light surged, we felt the energy shift, the ancient spirits rallying around us, pushing back against the figure's power. "You are not alone," they whispered, their voices intertwining with ours. In that moment, I understood. The spirits sought not vengeance but freedom from their own bondage. We could break the cycle, not through sacrifice, but through understanding and redemption. As the light enveloped us, we forged ahead, determined to uncover the truth and confront the darkness once and for all. And as the echoes of the past began to rise, I knew that our journey had only just begun. The light enveloped us, pulsing with an energy that felt both ancient and new. I could sense the spirits gathering around us, their whispers transforming into a harmonious chorus. The oppressive shadows began to recede, the figure's power waning as the brilliance of the light intensified. "Focus on the tablet," Dr. Marquez urged, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to remember the inscription." I knelt beside the remnants of the shattered stone, brushing away the dust to reveal the markings. The symbols glowed faintly, resonating with the energy around us. "It's a call for balance," I murmured, trying to recall the legends. "It talks about harmony between the worlds, the living and the dead." Lisa squeezed my hand, her presence grounding me amidst the turmoil. "What do we need to do?" she asked, her eyes wide with determination. "We need to unite our voices," I replied, feeling the weight of the spirits' longing. "If we can channel their energy, we might be able to break the cycle and release them." As I spoke, the whispers grew louder, the spirits urging us to act. "Together, we can find a way," I said, raising my voice to join the chorus. "We seek understanding, not sacrifice." Dr. Marquez nodded, stepping closer to the tablet. "Let the living and the dead find their peace. We honor you by giving voice to your pain and longing." We gathered in a circle around the remnants, our hands joined, feeling the connection surge between us. I closed my eyes, letting the energy flow through me, the memories of the past intertwining with the present. The figure snarled, its form flickering with anger, but we stood firm, our resolve strengthening with every heartbeat. "You cannot hold us," I shouted, channeling the power of the spirits. "We are not your offerings." In that moment, the world around us shifted. The cemetery transformed, the shadows dissolving into a lush landscape vibrant with life. I could see glimpses of the ancient Mayan civilization, the people honoring their traditions, their spirits interwoven with the earth. "Together, we break the chains," I cried, my voice ringing with conviction. "We honor the past, but we will not be bound by it." The figure writhed in frustration, but the brilliance of our voices resonated with the energy of the spirits, igniting a wave of light that surged outward, engulfing the cemetery in a radiant glow. The darkness howled, but it was no match for the unity we had created. "Release them," I shouted once more, feeling the spirits rallying behind us, their energy swelling as they responded to our call. "Release yourself." With one final push, the light burst forth like a supernova, illuminating the night sky. The shadows shattered, scattering into the ether as the figure let out a bone-chilling wail, fading into nothingness. As the brilliance enveloped us, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The whispers transformed into a soft lullaby, a gentle reminder of the Spirit's gratitude. We stood together, united in purpose, the past intertwining with our reality. Slowly, the light began to recede, revealing the cemetery once more, but it felt different. The air was lighter, the weight of dread lifted. The tombs no longer loomed ominously, instead, they felt like sanctuaries of rest. "We did it," Lisa whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Dr. Marquez smiled, relief washing over his features. "We honored them, and in doing so, we freed ourselves." As we made our way back to the van, I felt a profound change within me. The encounter had left its mark, reshaping my understanding of life, death, and the bonds that connect us all. The shadows no longer felt like a threat. They were echoes of a rich history, lessons waiting to be learned. As we drove away, the moon illuminated the road ahead, and I knew our journey was far from over. The whispers of the past would linger, but now they felt like guides rather than chains. We had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, with a deeper understanding of the power we held in our hands. And as I looked at my companions, I realized that the bonds we had forged would guide us through whatever lay ahead. We had confronted the unknown and emerged not just as survivors, but as stewards of the stories that connect us to our past. The night felt alive with possibilities, and as we continued down the winding road, I knew that the echoes of time would forever be a part of us, reminding us of the balance we must strive to maintain. The spirits of the ancients had found their peace, and in doing so, they had illuminated our path forward. Have you ever felt that chill in the air just before a storm? That unsettling sensation that something is not quite right? As I drove south of Los Angeles, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was heading into something unknown, something sinister. The sky darkened as I approached the new hotel, its facade looming against the backdrop of thickening clouds. The sign flickered, "Welcome to the Misty Pines Hotel," but the words felt more like a warning than an invitation. As I parked the car, a low fog began to roll in from the nearby hills, creeping toward the building like a hungry predator. I grabbed my suitcase, taking a deep breath to steady my nerves. It had been a long drive, and I was looking forward to a night of rest before my business meetings the next day. But as I walked toward the entrance, a shiver ran down my spine, a premonition of the darkness that awaited inside. The lobby was sleek and modern, yet something about it felt off. The air was still, too quiet for a place that should be bustling with guests. I approached the front desk, where a young woman greeted me with a forced smile. Her eyes darted nervously to the fog outside. "Welcome to Misty Pines." Checking in, she asked, her voice a bit too high-pitched. "Yes," I replied, trying to mirror her enthusiasm. "Just for the night." As she typed my information into the computer, I glanced around the lobby. The decor was lavish, artwork lined the walls, and the lighting was dim but warm. Yet, the emptiness loomed like a shadow, making the space feel less like a hotel and more like a waiting room for the lost. "Here's your key," she said, handing me a card that felt unusually cold in my hand. "Room 203. Enjoy your stay." I nodded, feeling her gaze linger on me as I turned to leave. Something in her expression hinted at an unspoken warning. I shook it off. Perhaps I was just tired from the drive. I made my way to the elevator, which hummed softly as I pressed the button for my floor. The ride-up was unnervingly quiet, the walls of the elevator closing in on me. As the doors opened, I stepped out into the dim hallway. The carpet felt plush underfoot, but the air was thick, as if the fog had seeped in through the walls. I hesitated for a moment before finding my room. As I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the air shifted. The room was pristine, but a sense of unease settled over me. I tossed my suitcase on the bed and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain. Outside, the fog was now swirling thickly, obscuring the view. I couldn't see more than a few feet in front of the hotel. It felt as if I had been cut off from the world. I forced myself to relax, shaking off the chill that wrapped around my thoughts. After a long drive, I needed rest. I settled onto the bed, hoping that sleep would wash away the eerie feeling. But just as I began to drift, a strange noise broke through the silence, a soft whispering, almost like a sigh carried by the wind. I bolted upright, straining to listen. It was faint, but unmistakable. The sound seemed to come from the hallway. I got up and tiptoed to the door, peering through the peephole. The corridor was empty, the shadows stretching and shifting in the flickering overhead lights. I stepped back, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe the hotel was settling. I shook my head, trying to convince myself. I returned to the bed, pulling the covers tightly around me. Sleep was elusive, my mind racing with thoughts of the day ahead. Hours passed, the night dragging on. Just as I began to doze off, the whispering returned, louder now, echoing in my mind. "Help us, help us." The words were chilling, filled with a desperation that sent a shiver down my spine. I shot up, heart pounding, listening intently. The fog pressed against the window, as if trying to invade the room. I needed to know what was happening. Driven by an inexplicable force, I grabbed my phone, hoping to find someone, anyone, to talk to. But as I turned it on, there was no signal. The screen flickered, the battery indicator showing empty despite being fully charged earlier. Panic surged through me. I was cut off. Completely isolated. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered, plunging me into darkness for a brief moment before they returned. I stumbled toward the door, the whispering now growing more frantic, echoing in my ears. "Help us, help us." With a trembling hand, I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The air was colder, the fog creeping beneath the door and swirling around my feet. I glanced left and right, my heart racing. The corridor was dimly lit, shadows clinging to the edges, but I felt drawn toward the source of the whispers. As I walked further down the hall, the voices grew clearer. They beckoned me, urging me to follow. This way, this way. I felt an unexplainable pull, as if the hotel itself was alive, pulling me deeper into its depths. I turned a corner, my breath quickening. At the end of the hallway stood a door, slightly ajar. The whispers were louder now, urging me to come closer. My heart raced as I approached, curiosity battling with fear. I reached out and pushed the door open. Inside, the room was shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from a flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. As I stepped in, the whispers ceased, replaced by an unsettling silence. The air felt thick, heavy with anticipation. And then I saw it, a figure standing in the corner, partially obscured by shadows. It turned slowly, its face hidden, but I could feel its gaze upon me. A chill ran down my spine, freezing me in place. "Help us," the figure whispered, voice trembling, laced with despair. In that moment, I knew I was not alone in this hotel. The darkness held secrets, and I was about to uncover them. But at what cost? The figure stood there, cloaked in shadows, a haunting silhouette that seemed to absorb the flickering light. My heart raced, pounding against my chest like a caged animal desperate for escape. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper, though my voice trembled. The figure took a tentative step forward, revealing a face pale and gaunt, eyes wide with terror. "You shouldn't be here," it said, its voice a mere breath, yet it echoed in the silence like a warning bell. "Why? What's happening?" I asked, trying to sound brave, but the words felt hollow. The whispers had returned, now swirling around us like a storm. "Where is everyone? Where are the other guests?" "They're gone," the figure replied, stepping closer, and I could see the anguish etched into its features. "The fog takes them. One by one. You must leave before it's too late." The urgency in its voice sent a chill through me. "What do you mean? How can I leave? The phone doesn't work, and the elevator, it feels wrong." "Not just the fog," the figure said, shaking its head. "It's the hotel itself. It traps souls. You must find the way out before it claims you, too." Desperation surged through me. "How? How do I escape?" The figure hesitated, glancing over its shoulder as if sensing something lurking in the shadows. "There's a door," it whispered urgently. "But you must act quickly. The longer you stay, the more it knows you're here." Just then, a low rumble echoed through the building, shaking the walls. The flickering bulb above us buzzed ominously, and the temperature dropped even lower. I could feel the shadows growing closer, creeping along the walls, and I knew I had to act fast. "Where's the door?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the rising panic. "Back down the hall," it replied, pointing shakily. "But you have to be careful. The fog knows when you're afraid." I turned, ready to bolt, but as I stepped away, the figure reached out, grabbing my wrist with a cold grip. "Please, don't let it take you." Its eyes bore into mine, pleading. "You have to believe me." I nodded, my heart racing as I felt the weight of its fear. I didn't understand what was happening, but something deep within me resonated with its urgency. "I will find the door," I promised, yanking my arm free. I dashed back into the hallway, the fog swirling around my ankles like a living entity. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of voices calling to me, pleading, warning. My footsteps echoed in the stillness as I sprinted toward the end of the corridor, my eyes scanning for any sign of a door, a way out. The air felt heavier with every step I took, and I could almost sense the fog closing in around me, a shroud of darkness ready to ensnare me. I turned the corner, my pulse quickening, and there it was, a door at the far end, slightly ajar, just like the figure had described. But as I approached, a low growl reverberated through the corridor, chilling me to the bone. I stopped dead in my tracks, the sound wrapping around me like a vice. It was coming from the shadows, from the very walls of the hotel. I could feel it, a predatory presence, hungry and waiting. "Go!" The figure's voice echoed in my mind, pushing me forward. I couldn't turn back now. I had to get through that door. With a surge of adrenaline, I sprinted toward it, the growling growing louder, more insistent. I reached the door and flung it open, stumbling into the darkness beyond. As I crossed the threshold, I could feel the temperature drop even further, the air thickening around me. Inside, the room was vast and empty, but it felt alive, pulsing with an unseen energy. I quickly turned to shut the door, but just as I did, I caught a glimpse of a shadow darting past. A figure, its shape indistinct and shifting, was moving through the fog. "Close it," the voice urged me, and I slammed the door shut, locking it tightly. My breath came in quick gasps as I leaned against the door, trying to steady myself. I scanned the room, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. In the far corner, I saw a staircase leading downward, shrouded in darkness. The whispers resumed, softer now, almost inviting. This way, this way. Fighting against the rising tide of fear, I approached the staircase. The shadows shifted, coiling around the banister as if beckoning me closer. I hesitated for a moment, but the thought of being trapped in that hotel forever drove me onward. I took a deep breath and began to descend, each step echoing in the silence. The air grew colder with every movement, a chill that penetrated deep into my bones. The walls felt like they were closing in, the shadows creeping ever closer. At the bottom of the stairs, I found myself in a long, narrow hallway. The whispers were now a faint hum, and I could barely make out the sounds of distant sobbing. My heart ached with a sense of despair, and I felt an overwhelming urge to help, to find whoever was trapped here. But as I moved forward, a sudden realization hit me. I had no idea what I was stepping into. The hotel was a maze of darkness, and I was lost in its depths, a moth drawn to a flame. A cold draft swept through the corridor, extinguishing the weak light that flickered from the walls. I paused, my breath catching in my throat as I strained to listen. The sobbing grew louder, echoing through the darkness, filling me with dread. Help us, help us, the voices echoed once more, now almost pleading, filled with a desperation that clawed at my heart. I took another step, compelled to follow the sound, my pulse racing. The hallway twisted and turned, and I felt as if the walls were shifting, guiding me deeper into the heart of the hotel. Each footfall felt like a countdown, the whispers rising to a crescendo. Help us, before it's too late. I was close. I could feel it. But as I rounded a corner, the hallway opened into a large room, and the sight that greeted me froze me in place. The walls were lined with mirrors, reflecting shadows that danced and flickered, creating a surreal and terrifying spectacle. In the center of the room stood a group of figures, their faces twisted in anguish, their eyes hollow and pleading. Join us, one of them whispered, its voice resonating through the room, pulling at my very essence. I stepped back, horror coursing through me. No! What do you want from me? But as I stood there, paralyzed by fear, I realized I was no longer alone. The shadows began to swirl around me, creeping closer, closing in on all sides. I was trapped, surrounded by the very darkness I had sought to escape. I had ventured into the heart of the hotel, but now it felt like the heart of a beast, ready to consume me whole. Desperation flooded my veins as I fought to break free, but the whispers grew louder, drowning out my thoughts. Help us, help us. As the shadows lunged forward, I knew that I had to make a choice. I could give into the darkness, surrender to the whispers, or I could fight back, find a way to escape the clutches of this cursed place. And in that moment of clarity, I chose to fight. Adrenaline surged through my veins as the shadows lunged toward me, their tendrils reaching out like grasping hands. I could feel their icy grip threatening to pull me under. But I couldn't let that happen. I had to fight. I turned on my heels and sprinted back down the corridor, the whispers now a chaotic chorus of cries. Help us. Join us. They echoed in my mind, threatening to drown out my resolve. But I pressed on, focused on escape. The hallway twisted and turned, each corner a potential trap. My heart raced as I glanced over my shoulder, the shadows lingering just out of sight, always close, always watching. I could feel their presence, an insatiable hunger that fueled their pursuit. I reached the staircase and hurled myself up the steps, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The bulb above flickered ominously, casting strange shadows that danced along the walls. With each step, The fear clawed at me, urging me to give in. But I wouldn't let it win. As I reached the top, I burst into the hallway, my eyes darting for the nearest door. I ran past my own room, its door still ajar, and continued down the corridor, desperate for safety. The whispers faded slightly, replaced by the sound of my pounding heart and the rush of blood in my ears. Then, a sudden realization hit me. The figure, the one who had warned me, where was it now? Had it been a figment of my imagination, a trick of the fog? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but I couldn't dwell on it. I had to keep moving. Finally, I spotted a door at the end of the hall, illuminated by a flickering light. It looked different, somehow more solid, more real than the others. With no time to hesitate, I sprinted toward it, the shadows creeping behind me, their whispers turning to frantic calls. "Don't leave us." I reached for the handle, feeling a jolt of energy as my fingers wrapped around it. I twisted and pulled, the door creaking open. I stepped inside and slammed it shut behind me, leaning against the heavy wood for a moment to catch my breath. The room was dimly lit, and my eyes quickly adjusted. It was filled with strange artifacts, ancient pottery, sculptures, and maps spread across a large table in the center. A sense of history hung in the air, thick and heavy. But I couldn't linger. The shadows would not be kept at bay for long. I glanced around, looking for anything that could help me. Then I saw it, a large, ornate dagger resting on a shelf, its blade shimmering ominously in the light. I approached the dagger, feeling an inexplicable pull toward it. As I reached out to touch the hilt, a surge of energy coursed through me, igniting a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the key to fighting back. The door rattled violently behind me, and I spun around, gripping the dagger tightly. The shadows pressed against the wood, their whispers rising to a deafening roar. "Help us! Help us!" I steadied my breathing, channeling my fear into focus. I needed to confront whatever lay beyond that door. It was time to reclaim my strength. With a determined shove, I threw the door open. The shadows surged forward, but this time I stood my ground. I raised the dagger, feeling its weight in my hand. "Get back!" I shouted, my voice echoing in the corridor. The shadows halted, recoiling as if stung. "Help us!" they cried, their voices intertwining in a haunting melody. "Why should I help you?" I demanded, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do you want from me?" One shadow stepped forward, its form coalescing into the shape of the figure I had seen earlier. "We are trapped, bound to this place. The fog feeds on our fear. It must be stopped." "Then how do I stop it?" I asked, my grip tightening around the dagger. The figure pointed to the end of the corridor, where the fog thickened like a wall. "You must confront the source, the heart of the hotel. Only then can we be freed." A wave of resolve washed over me. I couldn't let fear control me any longer. "Then let's do this together." The figure nodded, its form growing more defined. "Follow me." I followed the figure as it led the way down the corridor, the shadows trailing behind us like a dark mist. As we moved, the whispers transformed, no longer frantic but filled with an odd sense of purpose. Together, together. The air crackled with tension as we approached a massive door at the end of the hall. It was ornate, covered in intricate carvings that seemed to pulse with energy. The figure turned to me, its expression serious. "This is it. Are you ready?" I took a deep breath, nodding. "I have to be." The figure placed a hand on the door, and with a deep breath, I joined it. We pushed together, the door creaking open to reveal a vast chamber beyond. Inside, the atmosphere shifted, heavy with anticipation. The walls were lined with mirrors, reflecting the swirling fog that hung in the air like a living entity. In the center of the room stood a massive pedestal, upon which rested a dark, pulsating orb, the heart of the hotel. As I stepped closer, I could feel its energy, a mixture of fear and despair. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me, filling my mind. "Help us, join us." "Not today," I muttered, raising the dagger. "You will not take me." The orb pulsed violently, and the shadows surged forward, clawing at the air. But I stood firm, channeling my fear into strength. "You will not control me." With a swift motion, I thrust the dagger toward the orb. As the blade made contact, a blinding light erupted from the point of impact, filling the chamber with a radiant glow. The shadows screamed, their voices intertwining in a cacophony of anguish as they were pulled toward the light. The orb shattered, sending shards of darkness flying in all directions. The shadows writhed, their forms twisting in desperation. But I stood my ground, the dagger vibrating in my hand. "Be free!" I shouted, my voice ringing out above the chaos. As the light engulfed the chamber, the shadows began to dissipate, their cries fading into the ether. I could feel their fear transforming into something lighter, something hopeful. And then, silence. The room fell still, the remnants of darkness fading away. The oppressive weight lifted, leaving a sense of peace in its wake. The figure stood beside me, a serene smile replacing the anguish on its face. "You did it. We are free." I looked around, astonished by the transformation. The chamber was now bright and welcoming, the fog lifting to reveal walls adorned with vibrant colors. The shadows were gone, replaced by a warm glow. But even as relief washed over me, I felt a tug of sadness. "What happens to you now?" I asked, my voice softening. "We move on," the figure replied. "Thank you for your courage. You have set us free." With that, the figure began to dissolve into a cascade of light, its form shimmering until it vanished completely. I stood there, alone but not lonely, the weight of my experience settling into a sense of purpose. As I turned to leave the chamber, the path ahead felt clearer. I stepped through the doorway, leaving behind the darkness of the hotel. The whispers that had haunted me were now replaced by a gentle breeze, a promise of new beginnings. I emerged into the hallway, sunlight breaking through the fog. The hotel no longer felt like a prison but a place of healing. As I made my way outside, I felt a sense of liberation, a bond with those who had come before me. And as I stepped into the light, I knew I had faced my fears and emerged stronger. The city of fog would no longer haunt me. Instead, it had become a part of my journey, one that had transformed me in ways I couldn't yet understand. But I would carry the memory of that night with me, a reminder of the shadows I had faced and the light I had embraced. And in that knowledge, I found my freedom. As I stepped outside, the California sun bathed me in warmth, its rays cutting through the remnants of the fog like a knife. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with fresh air, savoring the freedom that washed over me. The hotel loomed behind, now just an old structure, a ghost of what it once was. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't entirely free. The experience lingered in my mind like a shadow, an echo of everything I had faced. I looked back at the hotel, its windows reflecting the sunlight, and I felt a pang of sadness for the souls trapped within. I had set them free, yet I remained tethered to their memories. As I walked away, I noticed a small group of people gathered near the entrance, their faces filled with curiosity. They were new guests, eager for adventure, but oblivious to the darkness that lurked within. My heart ached at the thought of them stepping inside, unaware of the horrors I had encountered. "Don't go in there," I called out, raising my hands in warning. The group turned, startled by my sudden outburst. "Why? What's wrong?" one of them asked, a young woman with bright eyes and an adventurous spirit. I hesitated, unsure how to convey the gravity of my experience. "That hotel, it's not what it seems. You need to be careful." "What do you mean?" another member of the group chimed in, skepticism evident in their voice. "It's just a hotel." "No," I insisted, stepping closer. "It's a trap. People have gone missing. I saw things, terrifying things. You have to believe me." The group exchanged glances, and I could see their doubt beginning to surface. "You probably just had a bad experience," the young woman replied, crossing her arms defiantly. "We're here to enjoy our vacation. Please," I implored, my voice rising. "I'm begging you. Don't stay there. You don't understand the danger." Before they could respond, a sudden chill swept through the air, sending shivers down my spine. The fog began to roll back in, thicker than before, swallowing the sunlight and creeping toward the hotel entrance. My heart raced as I realized it wasn't just an atmospheric change, it was a warning. "Get away from there," I shouted again, panic rising in my chest. "You have to leave now." The group looked back at the hotel, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. The fog swirled ominously, as if sensing their hesitation. "What's happening?" the young woman asked, her voice trembling. But before I could answer, the door to the hotel creaked open, and a gust of cold wind poured out, carrying with it the whispers I had come to dread. "Join us! Join us!" The group froze, eyes wide in horror. "What is that?" someone whispered. "Run!" I yelled, adrenaline surging through me once more. I grabbed the young woman's arm and pulled her back, urging the others to follow. "We have to get away." The group stumbled back, their fear palpable as the fog advanced, curling around their legs like icy tendrils. I felt their panic feed my own, the shadows lurking just beyond the threshold, waiting for their chance to reclaim new souls. As we ran, I glanced back at the hotel, feeling the weight of its darkness trying to pull me in. But I couldn't allow it to take hold again. "Keep moving," I shouted, guiding them away from the cursed place. We reached the edge of the property, and I turned to face them, catching my breath. "Listen to me," I said, urgency lacing my voice. "You have to leave this area. The fog is alive, and it feeds on fear. I don't know how long it will be before it tries to reach out for you." "Why didn't you say anything before?" the young woman asked, confusion mingled with fear. "I didn't know how to explain," I admitted, my heart heavy. "I thought it was just me, just my experience. But it's not. This hotel, it's a danger to anyone who steps inside." The group exchanged uneasy glances, the fog swirling ominously behind us. "We should go," one of them finally said, and I could see the resolve building in their expressions. "Please," I urged, "stay close and don't look back." As we hurried away, the whispers faded, but the weight of what I had experienced loomed large in my mind. I could still feel the energy of the shadows, the echo of their cries. I had fought back once, but I feared it was far from over. We reached the nearest road, where a few cars passed by, their drivers oblivious to the dark history that surrounded the hotel. I flagged down a vehicle, my heart racing as it came to a stop. "Get in!" I shouted, urging the group forward. The driver, an older man with a grizzled face, looked at us with concern. "What's going on?" "Just drive," I replied, not wanting to waste another second. The young woman climbed into the passenger seat, and the others piled into the back, confusion still evident on their faces. The driver hit the gas, and we sped away, leaving the fog and the hotel behind us. But even as we distanced ourselves from the darkness, I could feel it lingering at the edges of my mind. "Where are we going?" the young woman asked, glancing back at the retreating hotel. "Anywhere but there," I replied, trying to calm my racing heart. But the dread clung to me like a second skin. The hotel was gone, but its presence was still felt. After a while, the driver pulled over at a diner, its neon sign flickering brightly against the evening sky. "You all need to talk," he said, concern etched on his features. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I nodded, my hands trembling slightly as I climbed out of the car. The group gathered around me, their faces pale, still shaken by the fear I had tried to convey. "What really happened in that hotel?" the young woman asked, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. I took a deep breath, recalling the events that had unfolded, the shadows, the whispers, the desperate fight for freedom. "It's hard to explain, but I'll do my best," I said, my voice firm. "The hotel is a trap. It feeds on fear and despair. I confronted something powerful within its walls, something that wanted to take me, and it took others before me." The group listened, their expressions shifting from skepticism to horror as I recounted my experience. "We were lucky to escape," I concluded, glancing back toward the road where the hotel had been. "But we're not free from its reach. The fog might still linger, waiting for an opportunity." "Are you saying it could come after us?" one of them asked, eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I can feel its presence. We need to stay vigilant." As we sat in the diner, the weight of the past loomed over us. We shared stories, bonded by a shared experience of terror. But the shadows of the hotel lingered in the back of my mind, and I knew this wasn't the end. Suddenly, the diner's lights flickered, and the air grew heavy. I felt a chill sweep through the room, and the whispers began to creep back in, just at the edge of hearing. "Help us! Join us!" Panic surged as I looked around, seeing the confusion on the faces of the group. "We have to go!" I shouted, rising from my seat. "It's here!" The others followed my lead, and we rushed outside, the cold night air hitting us like a wave. The fog was creeping back, thick and ominous, coiling around the diner like a serpent ready to strike. As we sprinted toward the road, I turned back to look at the diner. The shadows were swirling around it, enveloping it in darkness. "We need to find a way to stop it," I urged the group, desperation clawing at my throat. "Where do we go?" the young woman gasped, her eyes darting nervously. "Anywhere but here," I replied, leading the way as we fled into the night, the echoes of the hotel haunting our every step. We ran, the fog chasing us like a vengeful spirit. I could hear the whispers more clearly now, wrapping around my thoughts, trying to pull me back. "Join us! Help us! Don't listen to them!" I shouted, glancing back at the group. Their faces were a mix of fear and determination, but I could see the doubt creeping in. As we reached a nearby forest, the trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting like skeletal hands. I led the way deeper into the woods, hoping to lose the fog among the trees. "What now?" the young woman panted, glancing around nervously. "We can't just keep running." I took a moment to catch my breath, trying to think. We need to confront it. The hotel's power is tied to the fog. If we can find a way to sever that connection, maybe we can break its hold. But how? One of the others asked, fear lacing their voice. I glanced around, the dark woods feeling almost alive. There must be something here. A way to fight back. I thought of the dagger, its power and energy. I wondered if I could use it again to channel that same strength I had felt when I stood against the shadows inside the hotel. I turned to the group, my resolve hardening. We need to find a clearing. Somewhere open. If we can draw the fog in, I might be able to use the dagger's energy to push it back. The young woman nodded, determination replacing the fear in her eyes. Lead the way. We navigated through the trees, the branches scratching at us like grasping fingers. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices calling out in desperation, echoing our fears. Help us, join us. Focus. I shouted, urging everyone to push through the mounting dread. We needed to find that clearing. After what felt like an eternity, we stumbled into a small open space. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting eerie shadows on the ground. I paused, taking a moment to gather my thoughts. This should work, I said, glancing around to make sure everyone was with me. As we stood in the clearing, the fog began to swirl around the edges, creeping closer, thick and menacing. Get ready, I warned. If this doesn't work, we need to run. The young woman stood beside me, her hands clenched into fists. What do we do? I took a deep breath, pulling the dagger from my pocket. The blade glinted in the moonlight, its energy pulsing faintly, almost as if it recognized the threat. I held it up, feeling the familiar warmth radiating from its core. By the power of those lost, by the strength of our will, I command you. I shouted, my voice cutting through the fog. Leave us in peace. The whispers intensified, swirling around us like a storm. I could feel the fog pressing in, its coldness wrapping around me, but I pushed back against the fear. You have no power here. We will not succumb. The fog hesitated for a moment, as if assessing my strength. Then, suddenly, I will not let you take us. The fog recoiled momentarily, as if surprised by my defiance. I could feel the power of the dagger intensifying, warmth spreading through my veins, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. The whispers shifted to frantic cries, growing louder, more desperate. In that moment, I realized the fog was not just a physical entity, it was a manifestation of the fears and sorrows of those who had been lost within the hotel's walls. Each voice was a soul reaching out, trapped in its own torment. Listen to me, I shouted, the energy of the dagger channeling through my voice. You do not have to suffer. I can help you find peace. As I spoke, the fog hesitated again, swirling in a chaotic dance. The shadows flickered, revealing faint outlines of faces within the mist, anguished expressions that reflected the pain of countless souls. I felt their fear seep into my own heart, but I fought it back. Release your pain. I continued, desperation fueling my words. Let go of the darkness. You can be free. The fog began to undulate, the whispers transforming from furious howls into softer murmurs, as if some of the souls were considering my words. But the darkness surrounding us was relentless, pushing forward again, threatening to engulf me. With renewed determination, I thrust the dagger into the air, feeling its energy pulse with life. By the power of those who stand with me, I command you to leave. You are not alone. We will help you. In that instant, the fog surged forward, but this time something shifted within it. The anguished faces began to flicker, revealing glimmers of light beneath their sorrow. I could see their pain, their fears, but also a glimmer of hope. The shadows wavered, retreating slightly, and I pressed on. You are not bound by this darkness. Let it go. Suddenly, a chilling wind swept through the clearing, sending shivers down my spine. The voices grew frantic, the fog twisting and swirling in a desperate attempt to cling to its power. No! You cannot escape. We will not let you go. I felt the weight of that resistance pressing against me, threatening to extinguish the light I was trying to summon. But I refused to yield. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, concentrating on the energy of the dagger, allowing it to guide me. Please, I whispered, my voice trembling. Find the strength within you. You can be free. As if hearing my plea, a soft light began to emerge from the edges of the fog. It flickered like a candle, illuminating the faces of the trapped souls. They paused, the chaos of their suffering momentarily quieted by the warmth of hope. Let go. I urged them. You have the power to break the cycle. Embrace the light. The fog surged again, but this time it split into two parts, one dark and chaotic, the other shimmering with a soft glow. The souls within seemed to respond, the flickering light expanding as they began to push back against the darkness. I held my breath, watching as the two forces collided. The whispers transformed into cries of relief, the anguished faces slowly fading as the light grew stronger, enveloping the clearing in a warm embrace. With a final surge, the darkness began to dissipate, swirling away like smoke. The cold tendrils of the fog pulled back, retreating into the depths of the night. The cries transformed into soft murmurs of gratitude, a chorus of voices echoing with relief. As the last remnants of the fog faded, a profound silence settled over the clearing. I opened my eyes, feeling the energy of the dagger still pulsing in my hand, but now it felt lighter, almost joyful. The souls I had fought for were finally at peace. The young woman and the others stared at the space where the fog had been, awe etched on their faces. "Do we really?" she started, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded, my heart swelling with relief. They're free now. We broke the cycle. But even as I spoke, a twinge of unease lingered in the back of my mind. The battle had been won, but the memories of that darkness would forever remain. As dawn began to break on the horizon, casting a soft glow over the trees, I turned to the group. We need to leave this place. It's not safe here anymore. The others nodded, still processing what had just transpired. We began our journey back through the forest, the air feeling lighter with each step. As we reached the edge of the woods, the sun broke through the trees, warming my skin and filling me with a sense of hope. I turned to look back at the clearing one last time, feeling a bittersweet connection to the souls I had fought for. Though the darkness had receded, I knew that the echoes of their suffering would stay with me, a reminder of the fragility of life and the strength of the human spirit. As we walked toward the road, the shadows that had haunted us began to fade into the light of the new day. The hotel, once a place of despair, would remain in the distance, a silent testament to the battles fought and won. And even though I had survived, I understood that I would carry the weight of this experience with me forever. The fight against darkness was never truly over. It merely transformed, shifting shapes as it awaited its next opportunity. But for now, as the sun rose higher in the sky, I allowed myself a moment of peace. I had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, and I would not let the shadows dictate my future. Together, we stepped onto the open road, ready to embrace whatever came next. What if time was not a straight line, but a loop spiraling back on itself, forcing us to relive our deepest regrets? As I stepped out of the van, the chill of the Utah air hit me. The mountains loomed like ancient sentinels, their peaks dusted with snow. My name is Alex, and I had come here with a group of researchers, all eager to study the phenomenon that had been reported in this remote area. But as I looked at the old house before us, something about it sent a shiver down my spine. The house was dilapidated, its paint peeling like the skin of an old man. The windows were clouded, as if hiding secrets from the outside world. My colleagues, Jenna, Mark, and Lucas, were already unloading the gear, chattering excitedly. I forced a smile, but inside, a gnawing feeling told me this place was different. Come on, Alex. We'll set up in no time. Jenna called out, her enthusiasm infectious, yet I couldn't shake the sense of foreboding. I followed them inside, the creaking floorboards echoing under our weight. Dust motes danced in the light streaming through the grimy windows. The air felt heavy, thick with history, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for us to disturb their slumber. Let's check out the main room, Mark suggested, leading the way. As we entered, I noticed an old grandfather clock in the corner, its pendulum swinging steadily, yet it felt oddly out of place. The clock's hands were frozen at 3:15, as if mocking the passage of time. This is the spot, Lucas declared, pulling at his notebook. This house has seen some strange occurrences, disappearances, sudden madness. People say time just stops here. I frowned. What do you mean, stops? Jenna shrugged, her voice light. Just stories, right? Old wise tales. I mean, look at this place. What's the worst that could happen? As we set up our equipment, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. I caught glimpses of shadows flickering at the edge of my vision, but when I turned, nothing was there. The air grew colder, and a silence enveloped us, deeper than the mountain's shadow. Okay, let's start, Mark said, breaking the tense atmosphere. We'll conduct some preliminary tests, see if we can pick up anything unusual. I nodded, but unease settled in my gut like a stone. As the evening wore on, we conducted our experiments, capturing data and setting up cameras. But every time I glanced at the grandfather clock, it felt as if it was ticking louder, echoing in my mind. As night descended, I volunteered to take the first watch. The others settled in for some rest, their laughter fading into the darkness. I sat in the main room, the flickering candle casting eerie shadows on the walls. I could hear the wind howling outside, but inside, the house felt trapped in a moment. Then I heard it, a faint whispering, just beyond the threshold of hearing. It was indistinct at first, but then it formed words, beckoning me closer. Come, remember. Heart racing, I stood and approached the door, the cold air seeping through the cracks. My hand hovered over the doorknob. Should I open it? What lay beyond? Alex. The voice startled me. Jenna appeared behind me, her eyes wide. What are you doing? I thought I heard something, I said, feeling foolish. It was just a sound. Let's stay inside. It's not safe out there, she whispered, glancing nervously at the door. I nodded, forcing a smile. But as I returned to my seat, the whispers returned, louder now. The shadows in the corners shifted, elongating and twisting, as if they were alive. Come, remember. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. But the feeling of being pulled into something ancient, something waiting for us, gripped me. I had a feeling that the house held stories, secrets woven into its very fabric, and I was meant to uncover them. The clock chimed softly, a sound that felt both ominous and inviting. I took a deep breath, my pulse racing. This was just the beginning, and I was about to discover that time was not just a measure of moments, it was a force that could unravel our very existence. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time, I wondered if we had stepped into a place where the past and present would collide, and whether we were ready for what lay ahead. As I drifted into uneasy sleep, the whispers filled my mind, and the shadows danced just beyond my sight, beckoning me into their depths. I awoke with a jolt, my heart pounding against my ribs. The shadows in the room felt thicker, more oppressive, as if they were wrapping around me. I glanced around, disoriented, and realized that the clock still read 3:15. Jenna was still asleep in the corner, her face pale in the dim light. The others were still out cold. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the remnants of a dream that felt more like a memory. I could see flashes of a woman's face, her eyes filled with sorrow, her mouth moving silently. "What is happening?" I muttered under my breath. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing my grip on reality. The whispers began again, this time clearer. "Remember, remember." I stood up, feeling a compulsion pulling me toward the door. This time, I didn't hesitate. I needed to understand what was happening. The air was colder as I stepped outside, the moon casting an eerie glow over the landscape. The mountains loomed in the distance, majestic and silent. I could hear the wind rustling through the trees, but there was something else, a faint echo, like laughter. I followed the sound, my feet moving almost of their own accord. As I walked deeper into the woods, the laughter morphed into cries, echoing off the trees. "Help us, please." I stumbled forward, each step feeling heavier. The shadows danced between the trees, and I could see flickering lights in the distance. I forced myself to breathe, my pulse racing. The air was thick with an electric tension, and I felt as though I were being watched. Then I reached a clearing. In the center stood an old stone well, covered in moss. The walls were crumbling, but I could see light emanating from within, a soft glow beckoning me closer. "Look inside," the whispers urged, a chorus of voices echoing through the night. With trembling hands, I peered over the edge. The well seemed to descend into darkness, but the light below pulsated like a heartbeat. I leaned in further, and the moment I did, a rush of memories flooded my mind, images of the woman from my dreams, her hands reaching out, pleading. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath me, and I stumbled back. The well's light flickered violently, and I could hear the cries intensifying, a cacophony of despair. "Help us! Don't leave us!" Panic surged through me, and I turned to run, but the shadows swirled around me, pulling me back. I felt hands grasping at my arms, cold and insistent, urging me to stay. I could see figures emerging from the darkness, ghostly silhouettes, faces twisted in anguish. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice trembling. "What do you want?" The figures hesitated, and I caught a glimpse of the woman again, her face etched with pain. "You must remember, you must help us." Before I could respond, the ground shook violently again, and I fell to my knees, disoriented. The shadows converged, and I felt myself being pulled into the depths of their anguish. In that moment, everything shifted. I was no longer in the clearing. Instead, I found myself in a small, dimly lit room. The walls were lined with faded photographs, faces I didn't recognize, but their expressions felt familiar. Then I saw her, the woman from my dreams, standing by a window, staring out into the distance. She looked older, worn, as if years of sorrow had taken their toll. I tried to speak, but my voice was gone. The scene around me flickered, the light dimming and brightening, as if time itself was bending. I watched helplessly as the woman clutched a letter in her hands, tears streaming down her face. "Why can't you see?" "It's all my fault," she cried out, her voice echoing in the stillness. I reached out, desperate to comfort her, but I was trapped in this vision, unable to interact. Then I saw a man enter the room, his expression dark and filled with anger. "Do you not see what you've done?" he shouted, his voice laced with bitterness. "You cannot change the past." The woman fell to her knees, sobbing. "I never meant to hurt anyone. Please, forgive me." The man turned away, storming out, leaving her alone in her despair. The room began to dissolve around me, the shadows creeping back in, and I felt the pull of the well once more. Suddenly, I was back in the clearing, gasping for breath. The whispers subsided, but the anguish lingered in the air. I realized I had seen a memory, not mine, but one from the house itself. What just happened? I murmured, looking around the clearing, feeling disoriented and afraid. Then I heard footsteps approaching. I turned to see Jenna and Mark emerging from the trees, their expressions alarmed. "Alex, we were looking for you," Jenna exclaimed, her face pale. "What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." I did," I stammered, trying to process everything I had just witnessed. "There's something in this place. It's alive." Mark exchanged a glance with Jenna. "We need to get back to the house. We're not alone here, and whatever is happening, it's not finished." As we hurried back, the weight of the night settled heavily on my shoulders. I could feel the echoes of the past pressing on me, threatening to consume us all. What had begun as a research trip had transformed into something far more dangerous, and I couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping through our fingers, weaving a tapestry of tragedy we were destined to unravel. The return to the house felt like stepping back into a different realm. The shadows that had once seemed mere specters now felt like living entities, breathing and waiting. As we crossed the threshold, I could still hear the echoes of the woman's cries in my mind, a haunting reminder of what lay beneath the surface. "Let's regroup and figure out our next steps," Mark said, trying to sound authoritative despite the tremor in his voice. Jenna and I nodded, but I could see the fear mirrored in her eyes. We settled in the main room, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows on the walls. I tried to shake off the lingering dread. "We need to document everything," I suggested. "What I saw out there, it felt real. It's like the house is revealing its past to us." Jenna shuddered. "But what if it's trying to trap us? That woman, she was begging for help. What if we're just pawns in a game we don't understand?" Mark rubbed his temples. "Look, we need to focus. If we can figure out what happened here, maybe we can find a way to break whatever hold this place has on us." I pulled out my notebook, ready to jot down everything that had occurred. The well in the clearing. I think it's connected to what's happening. It feels like a portal to the past. Just then, we heard a loud crash from the back of the house, followed by a series of hurried footsteps. "Did you hear that?" Jenna whispered, her eyes wide. "Stay here," Mark ordered, gripping a flashlight. He moved cautiously toward the sound, and I felt a surge of anxiety. The shadows seemed to dance closer, enveloping me in their grip. "Mark, wait!" I called out, but he was already out of sight. I exchanged a glance with Jenna, who looked just as terrified as I felt. Moments passed like hours as we waited in the tense silence, the shadows stretching and contracting. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "We should go after him," I said, my voice trembling. "Are you sure? What if we find something worse?" Jenna replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'd rather not be alone," I admitted, my heart racing. "We need to stick together." Taking a deep breath, we ventured into the dark corridor, the beam of the flashlight wavering as we walked. Each creak of the floorboards echoed ominously, and I felt a chilling sensation crawl up my spine. As we reached the back room, the air thickened, charged with an unsettling energy. Mark stood there, frozen in place, staring at the wall. "What did you find?" I asked, stepping closer. He pointed a shaking finger at a faded mural painted on the wall. It depicted a scene of villagers gathered around a similar well, their faces twisted in expressions of grief and despair. "Look at this," he said, his voice hoarse. "It's like they're offering something to it." Jenna leaned closer, her eyes widening. "These are the same faces I saw in the photographs," she whispered. "They were trapped here, just like us." Suddenly, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent, filling the room with a chorus of sorrow. "Help us, free us." I felt a pull toward the mural, an overwhelming urge to reach out and touch it. "It's like they're calling to us," I murmured, stepping forward. "Alex, don't," Mark warned, but it was too late. My fingers brushed against the cold paint, and an electric jolt surged through me. Visions flooded my mind, scenes of the villagers performing rituals, of fear and desperation, of a well that absorbed their pain and anguish. I gasped, stumbling back as the visions intensified. "Alex!" Jenna shouted, her voice breaking through the chaos in my mind. "What's happening?" "The well, it's feeding on their memories," I cried, my heart racing. "It wants us to remember, to relive their pain." Mark's face turned pale. "Then we have to stop it. We can't let it trap us like it did them." As the whispers grew louder, I knew we were running out of time. We need to confront whatever this is. If we can find a way to break the cycle, maybe we can escape. "But how?" Jenna asked, panic creeping into her voice. "Maybe we can use the well," I suggested, though the idea terrified me. "If it's a portal, we might be able to send our memories back to the past, to free them." "Are you out of your mind?" Mark exclaimed. "That's dangerous." "I know, but we don't have a choice," I argued. "We can't let this house keep feeding on our fear." The room trembled as the shadows around us thickened, and the whispers turned to frantic pleas. "Help us. Don't leave us." I could feel the weight of their sorrow pressing down on me, and I took a deep breath. "We'll have to go to the clearing. If the well is the key, we have to confront it head on." Mark hesitated, but then he nodded. "Okay. Together." As we prepared to leave the room, the walls seemed to close in on us, the shadows growing restless. "We have to move fast," Jenna urged. We hurried back through the house, the whispers trailing behind us, urging us onward. With each step toward the clearing, I could feel the tension rising, the air thick with anticipation. When we finally reached the well, the glow within flickered, pulsating as if it recognized our presence. The shadows loomed around us, but I stood firm, my heart racing. "On the count of 3, we jump in together," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "Are you sure about this?" Jenna asked, her eyes wide. There's no other way, I replied. We need to confront the past if we want to change our future. Okay, Mark said, steeling himself. Let's do it. 3, 2, 1, go. We leaped into the well, the world around us dissolving into a whirlwind of light and shadow. I felt the pull of the past wrapping around me, and I braced myself for what lay ahead. As we descended, the echoes of time surrounded us, and I knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would force us to confront the very essence of our souls. The sensation of falling enveloped me, a disorienting mix of weightlessness and dread. As we plunged deeper into the well, the light began to shimmer and swirl around us, illuminating fleeting images from the past. Faces appeared, haunted and desperate, glimpses of those who had come before us, trapped in this cycle of torment. Suddenly, we landed on solid ground, a soft thud breaking the eerie silence. I looked around, disoriented. We stood in a dimly lit cavern, the walls lined with crystalline structures that pulsed with a soft, ghostly glow. The air was thick with moisture, and I could hear the distant sound of water dripping. Where are we? Jenna whispered, her voice echoing eerily through the chamber. I think we're inside the well, I replied, my heart racing. But it's more than just a physical place. This is a reflection of their memories. Mark stepped forward, shining the flashlight around. Look at these markings, he said, pointing to intricate carvings on the walls. They depicted scenes of sacrifice, rituals, and loss, the faces of the villagers twisted in anguish. These were their stories. As I approached, the images began to shift, morphing into more recent events, scenes of us arriving at the house, of the fog creeping in, of our growing unease. It's showing us what we've experienced, I said, my voice trembling. Suddenly, the chamber was filled with the whispers again, but this time they were clearer, more urgent. Free us. You must remember. The ground trembled beneath our feet as the cavern began to shift, and I felt a wave of panic wash over me. What do we do? I shouted, my voice barely audible over the rising cacophony. We need to face it. Mark yelled back, his expression determined. We have to understand what happened here. Before I could respond, a figure materialized before us, a woman, her features eerily familiar. She looked just like the woman from the mural, her eyes filled with sorrow and desperation. You've come to help, she said, her voice echoing like a soft wind. You must remember what they lost. What do you mean? Jenna asked, stepping closer, her fear battling with empathy. The well feeds on memories, the woman explained. It binds us to our pain. You must confront the tragedy that happened here to set us free. As she spoke, images flickered to life around us, memories of a village in despair, of a great drought that drove them to desperation. I could see the villagers, their faces gaunt, making the fateful choice to offer sacrifices to the well, believing it would bring them salvation. The woman's gaze locked onto mine. You have the power to change this. You must acknowledge the grief, the loss. Only then can we be released. My heart raced as the realization hit me. We need to let go of our own pain, I said, glancing at Mark and Jenna. We need to share our stories. Mark nodded, his expression grim. It's the only way. We can't let their suffering continue. Jenna took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I've been holding on to so much. I lost my brother in an accident, and I never forgave myself. I thought I could save him. The shadows around us seemed to shimmer, drawing closer as her words hung in the air. I felt the weight of her grief, the echoes of her memories intertwining with the voices of the villagers. "I lost my father to cancer," Mark added, his voice breaking. "I didn't say goodbye. I was too angry. I thought if I ignored it, it would go away." With each confession, the chamber pulsed with energy, the crystalline structures vibrating in response. I could feel the tension building, the pain intertwining with our own. It was overwhelming. "I've been afraid to let go of my past," I admitted, my voice shaky. "I lost my mother to illness, and I thought I could prevent it from happening again by holding on to my fear." The air thickened with emotion, and the cavern resonated with the collective grief. The woman's face softened, her sorrow transforming into hope. "You must embrace the pain to set us free. Let the memories flow through you." I closed my eyes, allowing the memories to surface. I could see flashes of moments I had buried deep, my mother's smile, her laughter, the way she used to comfort me. I felt the warmth of her love, even amidst the sorrow. "I release you," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I remember you." As I opened my eyes, a wave of light surged through the cavern, illuminating the walls with a brilliant glow. The figures of the villagers began to emerge, their expressions shifting from anguish to peace. They stepped forward, their forms becoming more defined. "We are grateful," the woman said, her voice ringing with clarity. "You have freed us from the chains of time." The cavern trembled as the energy intensified, and I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. The whispers faded, replaced by a soothing calmness. The villagers smiled, their faces reflecting gratitude. Suddenly, the ground beneath us shook violently, and the walls began to crack. "We have to go," Mark shouted, grabbing my arm. "Now!" We turned to run, the path behind us collapsing as we fled deeper into the cavern. The light grew brighter, guiding us toward an opening that seemed to beckon us forward. "Keep going," Jenna urged, her voice filled with determination. We sprinted toward the light, the chamber shaking as if it were about to implode. As we reached the threshold, I felt a surge of energy propelling us forward. In an instant, we were back at the top of the well, the world spinning around us. We collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. The fog had lifted, revealing the sun-drenched landscape. "We did it," I whispered, tears of relief streaming down my cheeks. "We freed them." Jenna looked around, her expression filled with disbelief. "But what about the house? What will happen now?" Mark stood, brushing off the dust from his clothes. "I think it's done with us. The well is no longer a prison." As we turned to leave, I felt a sense of peace enveloping me. The weight of grief had lifted, replaced by a newfound understanding. We had faced our past and, in doing so, set others free. The house stood behind us, silent and still. We walked away, leaving the echoes of time behind, ready to embrace a future unbound by the chains of our memories. As we walked away from the house, the weight of our experiences lingered in the air, but it felt lighter, as if we had shed a layer of sorrow. The sun began to set on the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the landscape, illuminating the mountains that stood tall against the fading light. "I can't believe we made it out," Jenna said, glancing back one last time at the house. "It's like a part of me thought we might never leave." Mark nodded, running a hand through his hair. "We faced something unimaginable. But I think we also learned something important. Letting go is not just about forgetting, it's about embracing the memories." I looked at them both, feeling a sense of gratitude wash over me. "You both were so brave. I don't know if I could have done it without you." As we made our way back to the car, I felt a subtle change within myself. The fear that had once gripped my heart began to fade, replaced by a sense of clarity. I was ready to confront my future without the shadows of my past looming over me. Once we reached the car, I turned on the engine, the familiar hum breaking the silence. "So, what now?" I asked, curiosity bubbling up inside me. "We go home," Mark said, determination in his voice. "We take what we've learned and apply it to our lives. We can't let our past define us." Jenna smiled, her eyes shining with hope. "I want to explore more, to travel and experience everything I've been too afraid to do. I won't let fear hold me back anymore." As we drove down the winding road, the fading light painted the sky in hues of pink and orange. I felt a surge of excitement for what lay ahead. The world felt full of possibilities, and I was ready to embrace them. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, a soft melody filling the car. The song reminded me of my childhood, of carefree days spent with my mother. It struck a chord deep within me, and I found myself smiling, not out of sadness, but from a place of warmth and remembrance. "I think this song is meant for us," I said, laughter bubbling up as I glanced at my friends. A reminder of how far we've come. As we drove on, the song shifted, its melody growing more haunting, but instead of fear, it filled me with a sense of calm. I realized that we had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, with a deeper understanding of ourselves and the connections we shared. "Do you think the house will be okay?" Jenna asked, her voice tinged with concern. I considered her question for a moment. "I think it will be. We've given it closure. The past will remain, but it won't trap anyone else." Mark chimed in, "It's a place of memories, just like us. We carry them with us, but they don't have to weigh us down." As we continued driving, the mountains receded behind us, the road ahead winding toward an uncertain future. But for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to face it head on. "We should take a trip together," I suggested, excitement creeping into my voice. "Somewhere we can create new memories." "I'm in," Jenna said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Let's make it an adventure." Mark grinned. "Count me in too. We'll explore, discover, and most importantly, live." With each mile that passed, I felt the remnants of fear dissolve into a new sense of purpose. The echoes of the past would always be a part of me, but they no longer defined who I was or who I could become. As the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving a twilight glow, I realized that the journey was far from over. Together, we would forge ahead into the unknown, stronger for our experiences, ready to embrace the dawn of new beginnings. And as we drove into the night, the stars began to twinkle above us, like the memories we had freed, shining bright against the dark sky, each one a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the endless possibilities that lay ahead. This has been a long, dark journey through the night with Whisper Crowley. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Leave a like if these stories made you look at the darkness a little differently, and share in the comments what you enjoyed most or what gave you chills. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next Sinister Whispers. Until we meet again in the world of shadows.